The church bells rang like a death knell over Dead Horse, Texas, 1877. Clara Whitmore stood at the altar in a dress that reeked of whiskey and broken promises, her wrists bruised from her father's grip. The man beside her, Samuel Duran, was old enough to have fought in wars she'd only heard about. Her father had sold her like livestock to pay his gambling debts. But when the preacher asked for her vows, Clara didn't say "I do." She grabbed a knife and slammed it into the altar. "I ain't nobody's property." Stay with me until the very end of this story, and comment below what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled across the world. The morning Clara Whitmore's life was sold started like any other morning in Dead Horse, Texas, with the taste of dust and disappointment. She woke before dawn in the cramped room she shared with her younger sister Molly, in a shack that leaned so far to the left it seemed to be trying to escape their father's drunken rages. The walls were thin as paper, and through them Clara could hear her father snoring off another night of cheap whiskey and cheaper company. 14-year-old Molly slept curled against the wall, her thin shoulders rising and falling beneath a threadbare blanket. Clara touched her sister's hair, corn silk blonde, so much lighter than her own dark brown, and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her chest like a stone. Just a little longer, Clara told herself, just until I can get us both out of here. She was 17 years old, and she'd been telling herself that same lie for 3 years. Clara slipped out of bed, pulled on her worn calico dress, and stepped into the main room of the shack. Her father, William Whitmore, sat slouched at the table, his face gray and sweating despite the cool morning air. Empty bottles surrounded him like monuments to his failures. "Coffee," he grunted without looking at her. Clara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She'd learned years ago that words were wasted on William Whitmore. She moved to the stove, a rusty iron beast that barely held heat, and started the fire with practiced efficiency. As the coffee began to boil, her father finally lifted his bloodshot eyes to look at her. There was something different in his gaze that morning, something that made Clara's skin crawl. It wasn't the usual anger or indifference. It was calculation. "You're going to town with me today," he said. Clara's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Why?" "Because I told you to." His voice carried a warning she knew better than to ignore. Molly can take care of herself for one damn day." William pushed himself up from the table, swaying slightly. "Go make yourself presentable. Wear your mother's dress." Clara's heart dropped into her stomach. Her mother's dress, the only nice thing they owned, kept wrapped in muslin at the bottom of a trunk, was reserved for church and funerals. They hadn't been to church in months, and nobody had died. "Pa, what's this about?" William's face darkened. "You questioning me, girl?" "I just want to know." His hand shot out faster than she expected, catching her across the cheek with enough force to snap her head sideways. Clara stumbled against the wall, her ear ringing, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. "You'll know what I want you to know when I want you to know it," William said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now get ready. We leave in an hour." Clara touched her throbbing cheek, watching her father lumber back toward his room. Molly appeared in the doorway of their bedroom, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Clara?" "It's fine," Clara whispered, even though they both knew it wasn't. Nothing had been fine since their mother died 4 years ago, leaving them alone with a man who saw his daughters as burdens at best and commodities at worst. An hour later, Clara sat beside her father in their rickety wagon, wearing her mother's dress, a simple blue cotton that had once been beautiful but now hung loose on Clara's too thin frame. She'd tried to fix her hair, braiding it and pinning it up the way her mother used to, but her hands shook too much to do it properly. The ride into Dead Horse took 30 minutes along a road carved into the prairie by decades of wagon wheels. The town appeared on the horizon like a fever dream, a collection of weathered buildings squatting beneath the merciless Texas sun. The main street was lined with false-fronted stores, a saloon, a general store, and a church with a steeple that pointed accusingly at heaven. William drove the wagon directly to the Golden Spur Saloon. It was barely 9 in the morning, but already a few horses were tied out front. Clara's sense of dread deepened. "Come on," William said, climbing down. "Pa, I can't go in there. It's a saloon." "You'll go where I tell you to go." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to bruise, and hauled her through the swinging doors. The golden spur smelled like tobacco, stale beer, and broken dreams. A few men sat at tables scattered around the room, nursing drinks and nursing grievances. They all looked up when Clara entered, their eyes crawling over her in a way that made her want to scrub her skin raw. At a table in the back corner sat a man Clara had never seen before, though his type was familiar enough, a wealthy rancher by the look of him. He wore clothes that weren't covered in dust and a hat that hadn't been trampled by cattle. His face was weathered and lined, with a gray beard neatly trimmed. He had to be at least 50 years old, maybe older. William pushed Clara toward the table. "Mr. Duran, this is my daughter, Clara." The man, Samuel Duran, stood with the stiff formality of someone who'd learned manners in a different century. His eyes swept over Clara, but unlike the other men in the saloon, there was no hunger in his gaze. Just a deep, weary sadness that seemed to live in the lines around his mouth. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice like gravel grinding under wagon wheels. Clara didn't respond. She was too busy trying to understand what was happening, why her father had brought her here, why this stranger was looking at her like she was a problem to be solved. "Sit down, girl," William said, shoving her toward a chair. Clara sat, her spine rigid, her hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. William settled into a chair across from Samuel Duran with the satisfied air of a man about to close a profitable deal. "As I was saying, Mr. Duran, Clara here is a good girl, strong, healthy, knows how to cook and clean. She'd make a fine wife." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. "Wife? Pa?" Her voice came out strangled. William ignored her, keeping his attention on Samuel. "I know you've been looking for someone to help manage that big ranch of yours since your wife passed. Clara would be perfect. And seeing as how you're a man of means and I'm a man with debts to settle, I think we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." Clara's vision blurred at the edges. "He's selling me. He's actually selling me." "How much do you owe?" Samuel asked, his voice carefully neutral. $300? William shifted in his seat. "To Silas Crane. He's been pressing hard for payment, if you know what I mean. Said if I don't have it by week's end, he'll take it out of my hide. Or," his eyes flicked to Clara, "other collateral." Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Silas Crane is a snake." "That may be, but a snake can still bite. Now, I know 300 is steep, but Clara here is worth it. She's young, she's got childbearing years ahead of her, and she's obedient. I'm not a horse to be auctioned," Clara said, finding her voice. William's hand shot across the table, catching her wrist in a grip that made her bones creak. "You shut your mouth." "Let her go," Samuel said quietly. "This doesn't concern her. This is business between men. Let her go." Something in Samuel's voice made William release Clara's wrist. She pulled her arm back, cradling it against her chest, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Samuel's eyes met hers for the first time, really met them. They were gray, like storm clouds, and in them Clara saw something unexpected. Regret. "Miss Whitmore," he said slowly, "I won't insult your intelligence by pretending this is a romantic proposal. Your father owes money to a dangerous man, and I'm in a position to help. I have a large ranch that needs managing, and I'm alone. I don't expect love, I don't expect passion, but I can offer you safety, a roof over your head, and respect. More than that, I can offer your sister the same." Clara's breath caught. "Molly? If you agree to this arrangement, your sister comes too. She'll have a home, an education, and a future that doesn't involve being sold to the highest bidder when your father's debts come due again." The words were calculated to hit exactly where they'd hurt, or help, most. Clara thought of Molly, barely 14, already starting to catch the wrong kind of attention from the men in town. Their father had already tried to trade Clara. How long before he traded Molly too? "What about me?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What exactly do you expect from this arrangement?" Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying her with those storm cloud eyes. "I expect you to manage the household, if you're willing. I expect you to be honest with me, and I expect you to know that any door in my house that you want locked will stay locked. I'm not buying a slave, Miss Whitmore. I'm offering a transaction that might save your life and your sister's." "How noble of you," Clara said bitterly. buying a wife to save her from being bought by someone else. Clara! William's face flushed red with rage, but Samuel held up a hand. She's right. There's nothing noble about this. It's a business arrangement wrapped in the pretense of marriage, but it's the best option any of us have right now. Clara looked at her father, the man who'd raised her, who'd held her when she was small, who'd turned into a monster after her mother died. She looked at Samuel Duran, a stranger offering a cage that might be slightly more comfortable than the one she was already in. I need to think, she said. You don't have time to think, William snapped. Silas wants his money by Friday, and today's Wednesday. Then I'll think fast. Clara stood, her legs shaking, but her voice steady. But I won't be sold like cattle without at least one night to consider my options. She walked out of the saloon before either man could stop her, pushing through the doors and into the bright Texas sunlight that felt like it was trying to burn the truth into her skin. She had no options. She never had. Clara walked down Main Street with no destination in mind, just a desperate need to move, to breathe, to think. The town bustled around her, wagons rolling by, shopkeepers calling out their wares, women in proper dresses giving her sideways glances that said they knew exactly what business her father was conducting at the Golden Spur. She ended up at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The grass stretched out forever, golden and shimmering in the heat. Clara had lived her whole life in Dead Horse, had never been more than 20 miles from where she stood, and suddenly the world felt impossibly small and impossibly large at the same time. It's a pretty view if you don't think about what's hidden in all that grass. Clara spun around to find Samuel Duran standing a few feet away, his hat in his hands. Up close, she could see more details. The silver threading through his dark hair, the scar that ran along his jawline, the way his shoulders carried weight that had nothing to do with physical labor. Are you following me? Clara asked. Your father's passed out drunk in the saloon. Figured someone should make sure you got home safe. I can take care of myself. I don't doubt that. Samuel moved to stand beside her, looking out at the prairie. I've been taking care of myself since I was younger than you. Doesn't mean it isn't easier when someone's watching your back. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind rustling through the grass, carrying with it the smell of dust and distance. Why did your wife die? Clara asked suddenly. Samuel's jaw tightened. Childbirth. The baby, too. 3 years ago this spring. I'm sorry. So am I. He turned to look at her. I'm not looking to replace her, if that's what you're wondering. I'm looking for, I don't know, something that feels less like being alone in a house full of memories. Clara studied his face, searching for the lie, for the cruelty she knew must be hiding beneath the surface. But all she saw was a tired man trying to survive, just like her. If I say yes, she said slowly, and you hurt me or my sister, I won't. You say that now. They all say that. I'm not them. Samuel's voice was firm. I've never raised a hand to a woman, and I won't start now. You want it in writing, I'll put it in writing. You want witnesses, I'll get witnesses. You want a gun to keep under your pillow, I'll buy you the finest pistol in Texas. Whatever it takes for you to feel safe. Clara wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. A man she'd met an hour ago promising her safety in exchange for marriage. But she couldn't laugh because she could see in his eyes that he meant it, and that somehow made it worse. I need to see Molly, she said. I need to explain this to her before anything is decided. Of course. Samuel drove her back to the shack in his wagon, a much nicer wagon than her father's, with actual cushions on the seats and wheels that didn't squeak like tortured mice. Molly was waiting on the porch, her face pale with worry. Clara, where's Pa? Drunk in town. Clara climbed down from the wagon and took her sister's hands. Molly, we need to talk. They sat together on the porch while Samuel waited in the wagon, giving them privacy. Clara explained everything, the debt, the deal, the choice that wasn't really a choice. Molly listened with wide eyes, her fingers clutching Clara's so tight they hurt. So, you're going to marry him? Molly whispered. I don't know, maybe. He says you can come too, that you'll be safe. I don't want to be safe without you. Clara pulled her sister into a fierce hug. You will never be without me. No matter what happens, no matter where we go, we're in this together. Understand? Molly nodded against her shoulder, and Clara felt tears soaking through her dress. Samuel gave them 10 minutes, then cleared his throat gently. Miss Whitmore, I need an answer. Not for me. Silas Crane's men have been known to come collecting early if they think someone's trying to run. Clara looked at her sister, at the shack they called home, at the prairie stretching out in all directions with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. She thought about her mother, who'd loved a man who'd turned into a monster. She thought about all the girls in Dead Horse who'd married for love and ended up with bruises and broken spirits. At least with Samuel Duran, she knew exactly what she was getting. A transaction. No false promises of love, no illusions of romance, just survival, dressed up in a wedding band. All right, she said, standing up. I'll do it. But I have conditions. Samuel nodded. Name them. Molly gets her own room. She goes to school, and if you ever lay a hand on either of us in anger, I'll kill you in your sleep. A ghost of a smile touched Samuel's lips. Fair enough. Anything else? I want it in writing that if something happens to you, the ranch goes to me and Molly. I won't have your relatives showing up to throw us out. Done. And I want a horse of my own, one that's fast. In case you need to run? In case I need to run. Samuel extended his hand. We have a deal, Miss Whitmore. Clara looked at his hand, weathered and calloused, the hand of a man who'd worked for everything he had. She thought about her father's hands, always reaching for a bottle or a fist. She thought about her mother's hands, worn down to nothing by years of trying to hold together a family that was already broken. Then she reached out and shook Samuel Duran's hand, sealing a bargain that would change her life forever. We'll marry Friday morning, Samuel said. That gives me time to pay off your father's debt and arrange for a preacher. Bring what you want to keep, leave the rest. He drove away, leaving Clara and Molly standing in the yard of their falling down shack, holding hands like they used to when they were small, and their mother would tell them stories about princesses who saved themselves. Are we going to be okay? Molly asked. Clara looked at the dust cloud following Samuel's wagon, at the sun setting over the prairie, at the uncertain future rushing toward them like a stampede. I don't know, she said honestly, but we're going to survive. That's all we can do. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and dread. William Whitmore stumbled home Thursday evening, $300 richer and drunk enough to be almost cheerful. He didn't say goodbye to Clara, didn't offer any fatherly wisdom or regret. He just told her to be ready Friday morning and passed out at the table. Clara packed their meager belongings, a few dresses, her mother's Bible, a wooden horse that had belonged to Molly since she was a baby, and the knife her mother had used to teach her how to protect herself. A woman alone needs sharp things, her mother had said, for cutting vegetables and cutting losses. Friday morning arrived with the inevitability of a funeral. Clara dressed in her mother's blue dress again, fixed her hair as best she could, and tried not to think about what she was about to do. The church was small and mostly empty, just the preacher, Samuel, William, and a few townspeople who'd come to witness the spectacle of William Whitmore selling his daughter to the richest rancher in 3 counties. Molly sat in the front pew, her face streaked with tears. Clara walked down the aisle alone, her father having refused to waste sentiment on business. Each step felt like walking toward the gallows, but she kept her head high and her eyes forward. Samuel stood at the altar in a clean suit, his expression unreadable. He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, and Clara wondered what he saw. A girl, a burden, a solution to loneliness. The preacher, Reverend Walsh, opened his Bible with trembling hands. He was old, nearly 70, and he'd baptized Clara when she was a baby. He'd also buried her mother. Now he was marrying her to a stranger. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice shaking, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The words washed over Clara like dirty water. She barely heard them, focusing instead on staying upright, on breathing, on not running out of the church screaming. Clara Whitmore, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it. The moment. The choice that wasn't a choice. Clara opened her mouth, but the word wouldn't come. She looked at Samuel, at Molly crying in the pew, at her father watching with a satisfied smirk, and something inside her snapped. No. The church went silent. I'm sorry, what? Reverend Walsh blinked in confusion. I said no. Clara's voice grew stronger. I won't do this. I won't stand here and pretend this is holy, that this is right, that this is anything other than my father selling me like livestock to pay his debts. William shot to his feet. Clara, you ungrateful. I'm not ungrateful. I'm not anything except tired of being treated like property. Clara turned to Samuel. You seem like a decent man, Mr. Duran, and maybe in another life, under different circumstances, this could have been different. But I can't. I can't marry you like this. Samuel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Was it relief? Respect? Clara, the deal is done, William snarled, advancing toward the altar. You'll marry him or so help me. Or what? Clara reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out her mother's knife, the one she'd packed in case she needed to cut vegetables or cut losses. She held it up, the blade catching the light streaming through the church windows. You'll hit me? You've been doing that for years. You'll sell me. You just tried. I'm done being afraid of you. She turned and stabbed the knife into the altar, right through the Reverend's Bible, sinking it deep into the wood. I ain't nobody's property, she said clearly, her voice ringing through the church. Not anymore. The townspeople gasped. William's face turned purple with rage. Molly stared with something like awe. And Samuel Duran did something no one expected. He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised, who'd resigned himself to going through the motions of a loveless arrangement, and suddenly found himself face to face with a woman who had more fire in her than all the prairie grass in Texas. Well, he said, still chuckling, that's the most honest thing anyone said in this church for years. This isn't funny, William roared. We had a deal. We had a deal where I paid your debts in exchange for your daughter's hand in marriage, Samuel said calmly. But I won't marry a woman who doesn't want to marry me. That's not a deal. That's slavery. You can't back out now. I spent that money. I know. I paid Silas Crane yesterday. The debt's settled. William's face went from purple to gray. But the marriage is off. Samuel turned to Clara. Miss Whitmore has made it clear she doesn't want this arrangement, and I respect that. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding, waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're just letting me go? I'm not letting you do anything. You're free to make your own choices. Always have been, though your father tried to take that from you. You son of a bitch! William lunged toward Samuel, but the younger man sidestepped easily, and William crashed into the altar, knocking over the communion candles. Get out, Samuel said quietly. Before I forget, I'm in a church and break your jaw. William scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild. You'll regret this, both of you. Clara, you think you can just walk away? Where will you go? What will you do? You're nothing without me. She's worth more than you'll ever be. Molly's voice rang out clear and strong from the pew. And so am I. William looked at his daughters, one standing at the altar with a knife in her hand, one sitting in the pew with tears of pride on her face. And for just a moment, Clara saw something like recognition cross his face. Recognition of what he'd lost, what he'd destroyed, what he'd never get back. Then it was gone, replaced by the bitter anger that had consumed him for years. You're both dead to me, he spat, and stormed out of the church. In the silence that followed, Clara slowly pulled her mother's knife from the altar. The Bible was ruined, the wood scarred. She looked at the damage she'd done and felt no regret. I'm sorry, Reverend, she said softly. Reverend Walsh adjusted his spectacles, looking at the knife, the altar, the stunned congregation, and finally at Clara. Child, that's the first time I've seen anyone defend their soul in this church in 30 years. I think the good Lord will forgive a little property damage. Clara turned to Samuel, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I suppose you want your money back? No. No? Your father's debt is paid. That stands whether you marry me or not. Samuel picked up his hat from the pew. But I do have a proposition if you're willing to hear it. Clara's hand tightened on the knife. What kind of proposition? The kind where you and your sister come to my ranch anyway, not as my wife, as my employee. I need someone to manage the household, and you need a place where your father can't reach you. You'd have your own quarters, a salary, and the freedom to leave whenever you want. Why would you do that? Samuel was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. Because my wife's name was Elizabeth, and she would have done exactly what you just did. She would have stabbed that knife into the altar and dared the world to call her property. I loved her for that fire, and I'll be damned if I'm the reason it goes out in someone else. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, the first tears she'd allowed herself in years. I don't understand you. You don't have to. You just have to decide if you trust me enough to take the chance. Clara looked at Molly, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She looked at the ruined altar, at the shocked faces of the townspeople, at the open church doors through which her father had disappeared. She looked at Samuel Duran, who was offering her something she'd never had before. A choice. All right, she said, we'll come to your ranch. We'll work for you. But the first time you make me regret this decision. You still have the knife, Samuel finished. I know. He offered her his arm, not as a husband, but as an ally. Clara hesitated, then took it. Together they walked out of the church, with Molly following behind, leaving Dead Horse and William Whitmore and the life they'd known behind. The ride to Samuel's ranch took 2 hours, heading west into country Clara had never seen. The land opened up, vast and rolling, dotted with cattle and mesquite trees. The ranch house appeared on the horizon like something from a dream. A real house, 2 stories tall, with a porch that wrapped around the front and windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. It's beautiful, Molly breathed. Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. It's home, or it will be if you want it to be. A woman emerged from the house, an older Mexican woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense expression. So, she said, looking at Clara and Molly, you didn't go through with it. No, Rosa, I didn't. Samuel climbed down from the wagon. This is Clara Whitmore and her sister Molly. They'll be staying with us. Clara will manage the household, and Molly will attend school in town. Rosa studied them both with sharp black eyes, then nodded. Good. This house needs life in it again. Come, I'll show you to your rooms. The inside of the house was even more beautiful than the outside. Hardwood floors, real furniture, rugs that didn't have holes, and windows with curtains. Rosa led them upstairs to 2 rooms side by side, each with a real bed and a dresser and space to breathe. This is yours, Rosa said to Clara, gesturing to the larger room. The smaller one is for your sister. Bathroom is down the hall. Supper is at 6. Don't be late. She left them standing in Clara's new room, and for a long moment neither sister could speak. Clara, Molly finally whispered, what just happened? Clara sat down on the bed, a real bed with a real mattress, and started to laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd been holding their breath for years and finally remembered how to breathe. I don't know, she said, wiping tears from her eyes. I honestly don't know. But for the first time in 4 years, I think we might be okay. That night, Clara stood on the porch of Samuel's ranch house, looking out at the stars scattered across the Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. She heard the door open behind her and knew without looking that it was Samuel. Can't sleep? He asked, joining her at the railing. Too quiet. I'm used to hearing my father snoring or yelling. It'll take time to adjust. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, crickets singing in the grass, the wind whispering secrets to the prairie. Why did you really do it? Clara asked. Let me out of the marriage. Bring us here. Give us a home. What do you get out of it? Samuel was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. When Elizabeth died, I thought I'd died too. I went through the motions, running the ranch, eating, sleeping, but I wasn't alive. I was just existing. And then your father came to me with his proposition, and I thought maybe having someone in the house, even through a business arrangement, would make it feel less empty. He turned to look at her. But when you stabbed that knife into the altar, when you stood up for yourself and your sister, I saw something I hadn't seen in 3 years, someone who was fighting to live, not just exist, and I realized that's what I need. Not a wife bought and paid for, but life. Real, messy, complicated life. Clara's throat tightened. I'm not here to fix you. I know. I'm not asking you to. He smiled slightly. But maybe If we're both trying to figure out how to live again, we can do it together. As friends. As allies. As two people who got a second chance they didn't expect. Clara looked at this man who'd saved her without asking for anything in return, who'd given her a choice when no one else would, who saw her as a person instead of property. He wasn't perfect. She could see the scars of his own pain, the weight he carried, the loneliness that hadn't left just because she and Molly had arrived. But he was trying, and maybe that was enough. Friends, she agreed, extending her hand. Samuel shook it, his grip firm and warm. Friends. As Clara lay in her bed that night, a real bed in a real room with a door she could lock if she wanted to, she thought about everything that had happened. She'd been sold by her father, had almost married a stranger, had found her courage at the worst possible moment and the best possible time. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she and Samuel would remain friends or become something more, if Molly would thrive or struggle, if William would come back to cause trouble or disappear into the bottom of a whiskey bottle. But for the first time in years, Clara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hope. She smiled into the darkness, her mother's knife under her pillow, and her sister sleeping safely in the next room, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. The real story was just beginning. The first week at this Duran ranch passed in a strange fog of adjustment and discovery. Clara woke each morning expecting to find herself back in the leaning shack, expecting her father's angry voice or the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her chest. Instead, she found sunlight streaming through real curtains, the smell of Rosa's coffee drifting up from the kitchen, and the unfamiliar sensation of safety. But safety, Clara was learning, came with its own complications. Samuel was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. He kept his distance, treating her with a formal courtesy that somehow felt more isolating than kindness. He left for the range before dawn and returned after dark, taking his meals in his study, communicating through Rosa or brief notes left on the kitchen table. Fence needs mending in the south pasture. Cattle count at week's end. Molly's school tuition is paid through the term. It was as if he'd brought them to his ranch and then couldn't bear to actually share space with them. Rosa, on the other hand, had no such reservations. She put Clara to work immediately, teaching her the rhythms of the ranch house with brisk efficiency. You think managing a household is woman's work? Something simple? Rosa had said that first morning, handing Clara an apron. This ranch employs 15 men. They need to be fed 3 times a day. The house has 12 rooms. The books need keeping, the supplies need ordering, the kitchen garden needs tending, and Senor Duran, he needs someone to remind him to eat like a human being instead of a coyote grabbing scraps. Clara had learned quickly that Rosa had been with Samuel since he'd first bought the ranch 10 years ago, had been there when he'd married Elizabeth, had held his hand when Elizabeth and the baby died. She was fiercely protective of him, which meant she watched Clara with the intensity of a hawk watching a rabbit. You broke his heart, you know, Rosa said on the third morning as they kneaded bread dough side by side. On that altar. Clara's hands stilled. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't. See, I know. You couldn't marry a man you didn't love, a man you were sold to like cattle. You were right to say no. Rosa's strong hands worked the dough with practiced efficiency. But Senor Duran, he is a man who believes in keeping his word. He made a deal with your father, and when you said no, he thought he had failed you, failed himself, failed the memory of his Elizabeth. That's not fair. I didn't have a choice. Life is not fair, mija. But now you are here, living in his house, eating his food, taking his protection, and he doesn't know what to do with you. He doesn't know if you hate him for trying to buy you, or if you're grateful he let you go, or if you're just biding time until you can leave. Clara punched the dough harder than necessary. What do you think I should do? Rosa smiled, the first real smile Clara had seen from her. I think you should stop avoiding each other like scared rabbits. Talk to him. He's not your father. He's not a monster. He's just a lonely man who forgot how to be around people. That evening, Clara decided to take Rosa's advice. She prepared a tray with supper, beef stew, fresh bread, and coffee, and carried it to Samuel's study. She'd only glimpsed the room before, a space lined with books and papers smelling of leather and tobacco. She knocked on the door, her heart hammering. Come in. Samuel sat behind a massive oak desk, ledgers spread before him, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face when he saw Clara. "Miss Whitmore, is something wrong?" "Yes," Clara said, setting the tray down with more force than necessary. "You're avoiding me." Samuel blinked. "I'm not—" "You are. You leave before dawn, you come back after dark. You eat alone in here like some kind of hermit. I understand this is your house, and you can do what you want, but if we're going to live under the same roof, we need to at least be able to share a meal without you running for the hills." A ghost of a smile touched Samuel's lips. "I wasn't running. You were practically galloping." Samuel sat back in his chair, studying her with those storm cloud eyes. "You're right. I have been avoiding you, but not because I don't want you here." "Then why?" He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the desk. "Because I don't know how to act around you. In town, people look at me and see the man who tried to buy William Whitmore's daughter. They see someone who's either a saint for letting you out of the marriage or a fool for paying the debt anyway. And I look at you and see someone I wronged, even though I was trying to help." Clara pulled up a chair and sat down across from him. "You didn't wrong me. My father did. Silas Crane did. The whole damn system that says a woman can be traded for debt did. You just tried to make the best of a bad situation. By purchasing you like livestock. By offering me a way out that didn't involve me and Molly starving in that shack or worse." Clara leaned forward. "Samuel, I'm not going to pretend what happened was normal or right, but you gave me a choice when no one else would. You let me say no. That means something." Samuel's expression softened slightly. "Rosa put you up to this, didn't she?" "She said you were avoiding me like a scared rabbit." He laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. "That sounds like Rosa." Clara found herself smiling. "She also said you eat like a coyote grabbing scraps. So you're going to eat this stew while it's hot, and we're going to talk like normal people. Agreed?" "You're very bossy for an employee." "I'm very bossy in general. You should have asked my father about that before you decided to bring me here." She pushed the tray toward him. "Eat." Samuel ate, and they talked. Not about the wedding that wasn't, or the debt, or the complicated tangle of obligation and gratitude between them. They talked about the ranch, about the cattle drive coming up in the fall, about the new windmill that needed installing, about the drought threatening the grazing land. "The creek in the east pasture is running low," Samuel said, sopping up stew with bread. "If we don't get rain soon, we'll have to move the herd to the North Range, but that means crossing Fletcher's land, and he charges for that." "What if we dug wells?" Clara asked. "My mother told me stories about her family in Missouri, how they dig shallow wells during dry spells to keep the livestock watered." Samuel paused, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "That could work. It would take labor, and we'd need to hit water at the right depth, but—" He looked at her with something like respect. "That's actually a good idea. Don't sound so surprised. I may not know ranching, but I know drought." They talked until the stew went cold and the coffee was gone, until Clara realized the sun had set and the study was lit only by the golden glow of the oil lamp. It was the first real conversation she'd had with Samuel, the first time she'd seen him as something other than the man who'd almost owned her. "I should let you get back to work," Clara said, standing. Samuel stood too. "Clara, Miss Whitmore, thank you. For the meal, and for this. I've been living like a ghost in my own house. It's good to remember what it feels like to talk to someone." "Then we should do it again, tomorrow night, same time. And Samuel?" "Yes?" "Call me Clara." "Miss Whitmore sounds like you're talking to a stranger." Samuel nodded slowly. "Clara it is. And you can call me Samuel, or Sam, if you prefer." "Samuel suits you better. Sam sounds too friendly." He laughed. "And we wouldn't want that." Clara left the study with a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. It wasn't love, she wasn't naive enough to believe in that, not after everything she'd seen, but it was something. Connection, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. The next morning, Clara woke to find a book outside her door, a worn copy of Jane Eyre with a note tucked inside. "Thought you might enjoy this. A woman who refuses to be owned. S." Clara stared at the book, her throat tight. She'd never owned a book before, had only read from her mother's Bible and the occasional newspaper her father brought home. She opened it carefully, running her fingers over the pages, and found Samuel's handwriting in the margins, notes and thoughts he'd written years ago, pieces of his mind preserved in ink. She spent the morning reading between her chores, stolen moments of Jane's story woven into the rhythm of Clara's new life. When evening came, she returned to Samuel's study with supper and the book. "I'm only on chapter 5, she said, setting down the tray. "But I have questions." Samuel looked up from his ledgers, a smile already forming. "Questions about what?" "About Mr. Rochester. I don't like him." "You're not supposed to. Not yet." They talked about books and characters, about Jane's fire and Rochester's darkness, and Clara realized this was Samuel's way of communicating, through stories, through the words of others because his own were hard to find. The pattern continued. Each night, Clara brought supper to the study. Each morning, a new book appeared outside her door. Little Women, Wuthering Heights, Pride and Prejudice. Samuel was building her a library, one book at a time, and Clara was building something too. A bridge between them made of words and stories and slowly growing trust. Molly was thriving in ways Clara had never imagined possible. The school in Dead Horse was a one-room building with a tired teacher and no books. But in town, the larger town of Redemption 10 miles from the ranch, the school was different. Real desks, real books. A teacher named Miss Abigail Thornton who actually cared about learning. "She says I'm smart," Molly told Clara one evening, her eyes bright with excitement. "She says I could be a teacher too if I wanted, or a nurse, or anything." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "You can be anything you want, Molly. That's the whole point." But Molly's happiness came with its own complications. The other students, children of ranchers and shopkeepers, children who'd never known real hunger or fear, treated Molly with suspicion. They knew who she was, knew her father was the town drunk, knew she was only in their school because Samuel Duran paid her way. "They call me Charity Case," Molly admitted one night, her voice small. "They say I don't belong." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "Who says that?" "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." Molly shook her head. "I can handle it, Clara. I've handled worse, but—" She hesitated. "Do you think Mr. Duran would teach me to ride? If I could ride to school myself, maybe they'd respect me more." The next morning, Clara brought it up with Samuel over breakfast, a meal she'd insisted they share in the dining room instead of his study. "Molly wants to learn to ride," Clara said, buttering toast with perhaps more force than necessary. "The kids at school are giving her trouble, and she thinks if she could ride in on her own horse, they'd take her seriously." Samuel looked up from his eggs. "The kids are giving her trouble?" "They call her a Charity Case." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to Abigail Thornton." "Don't. Molly doesn't want special treatment. She wants to earn their respect herself." Clara met his eyes. "So will you teach her to ride?" "I'll do better than that. I'll give her a horse." "Samuel, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He stood, pushing back from the table. "Tell Molly to meet me at the stables after school today. We'll find her the right mount." Clara watched him go, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This man who'd tried to buy her, who kept his distance, who hid behind books and work, he was also the man who paid for Molly's education, who gave them a home, who saw a 14-year-old girl's need to stand on her own and offered her the means to do it. That afternoon, Clara and Rosa watched from the porch as Samuel led Molly through the stables, introducing her to each horse. He was patient, explaining temperaments and gaits, letting Molly make her own choice. "That one," Molly said finally, pointing to a dappled gray mare with gentle eyes. "She looks kind." "She is kind," Samuel agreed. "Her name is Willow. She was Elizabeth's horse." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Samuel had kept his dead wife's horse for 3 years, unable to let go, and now he was giving her to Molly. Molly looked up at Samuel with understanding beyond her years. "Are you sure?" Samuel's hand rested on Willow's neck, his expression distant. "Elizabeth would have wanted someone to love her, someone who needed her. That's you, Molly." Over the next weeks, Samuel taught Molly to ride. Clara would watch from the kitchen window as they worked in the corral. Samuel patient and encouraging, Molly determined and fearless. It was in those moments that Clara saw a different side of Samuel, the father he might have been if his child had lived, the teacher he could be when he let his guard down. "He's good with her," Rosa observed one evening, kneading dough beside Clara. "He tried to hide from the pain by hiding from everything. But your sister, she's bringing him back to life." "What about me?" Clara asked, surprising herself with the question. Rosa smiled knowingly. "You, mija, are bringing him back to himself." Clara didn't know what to make of that, so she focused on her work. She was finding her own rhythm at the ranch, learning not just household management, but the deeper workings of the place. She discovered she had a head for numbers, could track expenses and income with an efficiency that impressed even Samuel. She reorganized the kitchen, planned meals that stretched their supplies, and started a garden that Rosa swore would rival anything in 3 counties. But it was the evenings with Samuel that Clara looked forward to most. Their conversations had expanded beyond books to everything: politics, philosophy, dreams, and regrets. Samuel told her about his childhood in Virginia, how he'd come west after the war to escape memories of battlefields and brothers who hadn't come home. Clara told him about her mother, about the woman who'd been strong until she wasn't, who'd loved a man who destroyed her. "Do you think love is worth it?" Clara asked one night during a discussion of Wuthering Heights. "Knowing it can destroy you?" Samuel was quiet, staring into his coffee. "I think love is like the prairie, beautiful and brutal, life-giving and deadly, depending on the season. Elizabeth and I had 10 years together, 10 years of joy and partnership and laughter. Then one day of loss that nearly broke me." He looked up at Clara. "But I wouldn't trade those 10 years for anything. The pain was worth the love." "I'm not sure I believe that." "You might someday, when you find someone worth the risk." Clara's heart skipped. "And if I don't want the risk? If I'm content with safety?" Samuel smiled sadly. "Then you'll be safe." "But Clara, safety isn't the same as living." The words haunted her, especially when she lay in bed at night, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. She thought about her mother, who'd loved recklessly and paid the price. She thought about Samuel, who'd loved and lost and survived. She thought about herself, standing at a crossroads between safety and something more dangerous, more real. It was Rosa who finally pushed her to confront what she was feeling. "You're falling for him," Rosa said bluntly one morning as they worked in the kitchen garden. Clara's hand stilled on the tomato plant she was staking. "I am not." "See, you are. I see how you look at him when you think no one's watching. I see how you smile when you hear his voice. I see how you've stopped treating this place like a temporary stop and started treating it like home. That doesn't mean I'm falling for him. It just means I'm adapting." Rosa laughed. "Call it what you want, mija, but that man is falling for you too, and you're both too stubborn to admit it." "Samuel doesn't see me that way. I'm the girl he almost bought, the reminder of his failure. He sees you as the woman who was brave enough to say no, who had the fire to fight for herself and her sister, who's making his house feel like a home again." Rosa's expression softened. Senor Duran, he loved Elizabeth with everything he had, but Elizabeth is gone, and he's still here, still living, and maybe ready to love again. If he lets himself, if you let him. Clara wanted to dismiss Rosa's words, but they settled in her chest like stones, heavy and undeniable. Was she falling for Samuel? She thought about how her heart raced when she heard his footsteps in the hall, how she looked forward to their evenings together, how safe she felt knowing he was nearby. That wasn't love, was it? That was just gratitude, just comfort, just... "Dios mío," Rosa said, watching Clara's face. "You didn't even know, did you? Ay, mija, you have it bad." Before Clara could respond, they heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast. Both women looked up to see a rider coming hard toward the ranch house, dust billowing behind him. It was one of Samuel's ranch hands, a young man named Tom, and his face was pale with urgency. "Miss Clara," he called, swinging down from his horse. "Where's the boss?" "Out checking the north fence. Why? What's wrong?" Tom's eyes were wide. "It's your father. He's in redemption, at the Lucky Star Saloon, drunk and carrying on about his daughters. He's saying..." Tom hesitated, glancing at Rosa. He's saying you and Miss Molly belong to him, that Mr. Durand stole you, and he's demanding you be brought back. Clara's blood ran cold. Molly? Where's Molly? School, I reckon. But, Miss, your father, he's got some men with him. They're talking about riding out here, taking you both back by force if they have to. Clara's mind raced. Molly would be getting out of school soon, would be riding Willow back to the ranch, completely unaware of the danger. And Samuel was out on the range, unreachable. Rosa, can you ride? Clara asked. See, but go find Samuel. Tell him what's happening. Tom, you're coming with me to Redemption. Miss Clara, you can't go into town. My father is about to grab my sister on her way home from school, and I'll be damned if I let that happen. Clara was already moving toward the stables, her mother's knife tucked into her belt beneath her skirt. We're going to get Molly and bring her back here where she's safe. Tom exchanged a worried look with Rosa, but he followed. Within minutes, Clara was mounted on one of the ranch horses. Not Willow, but a strong gelding named Thunder, and riding toward Redemption with Tom at her side. The 10 miles had never felt longer. Clara pushed Thunder hard, her mind filled with visions of William grabbing Molly, of her sister's screams, of everything they'd built crumbling because Clara hadn't protected her well enough. They reached Redemption just as school was letting out. Clara spotted Molly immediately, mounting Willow with her books strapped to the saddle. Her sister looked happy, carefree, laughing at something another student had said. Molly! Clara called, riding up fast. Molly's smile faded when she saw Clara's face. What's wrong? We need to go, now. But now, Molly. They were turning to leave when Clara heard a voice that made her blood freeze. Well, well, look what we have here. William Whitmore stood at the edge of the street, flanked by 2 men Clara recognized from Dead Horse, rough types who'd do anything for whiskey money. Her father looked worse than she'd ever seen him, his eyes wild, his clothes filthy, his hands shaking with drink and rage. Pa, Clara said carefully, positioning Thunder between William and Molly, you need to leave. Leave? These are my daughters, my property, and I'm taking them back. We're not your property. We never were. William laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think Durand can protect you? He's nothing. He paid my debts, sure, but that doesn't buy him my daughters. I got rights. The law says so. The law says you can't sell your children to pay gambling debts. But I can bring them home where they belong, especially when I've got witnesses saying you were taken against your will. He gestured to the men beside him, who nodded in practiced unison. These good men will testify that Durand kidnapped you, forced you onto his ranch. Sheriff will have to investigate, might even put Durand in jail, unless... His smile turned calculating. Unless you and Molly come home peaceful-like, then we can forget this whole misunderstanding. Clara's hand moved to the knife at her belt. You're drunk and you're lying. Samuel didn't kidnap anyone. I chose to go with him. I chose to leave you. You chose to abandon your own father. William's voice rose, drawing a crowd. People emerged from shops and doorways, watching the drama unfold. You chose a stranger over your own blood. You stopped being my father when you tried to sell me. William's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, but Tom spurred his horse between them. Mr. Whitmore, you need to back down, Tom said firmly. Miss Clara and Miss Molly are under Mr. Durand's protection. You come near them, you'll answer to him. Protection? He bought them. Just like I was going to sell them to Silas Crane, Durand bought them instead. Don't act like he's some kind of saint. The crowd murmured, and Clara felt the weight of their judgment. She saw it in their faces, the suspicion, the scandal, the assumption that she and Samuel had done something improper. Samuel paid your debt, Clara said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. He offered me marriage, and I said no. He let me say no. Then he offered me employment, a job, a salary, a home for me and Molly. That's not buying. That's saving. You think these people believe that? William gestured to the crowd. They know what happens when a young girl moves into a bachelor's house. They know nothing, a new voice cut in, strong and clear. Clara's heart leapt. Samuel rode into the square on his black stallion, Zeus, with Rosa close behind. His face was set in an expression Clara had never seen before, controlled fury that made even William take a step back. Samuel dismounted in one smooth motion, walking straight toward William with the confidence of a man who owned half the county and the respect of the other half. "You have a lot of nerve, Whitmore," Samuel said quietly, "spreading lies about my integrity and Miss Clara's reputation. I ain't lying. You bought my daughter. I paid your debt, that's all. And when your daughter refused to marry me, I respected her decision. Then I offered her honest employment, which she accepted. Everything above board, everything proper, with Rosa as chaperone." Samuel's voice rose so the crowd could hear every word. "Unlike you, who tried to trade your own flesh and blood to a snake like Silas Crane." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Silas Crane's reputation was well known. He ran a brothel in the next county, trafficked in girls bought from desperate fathers. "You told me the debt was gambling," someone in the crowd said. "You didn't say it was to Crane." "Everyone knows what debt to Crane means," someone else added. William's face went pale. "I was desperate. A man does what he has to—" "A man protects his children," Samuel said. "A man doesn't sell them to predators. Now you've got two choices, Whitmore. You can leave town peacefully and never bother Clara or Molly again. Or I can tell the sheriff exactly what you tried to do, and we'll let the law decide if selling your daughter to a man like Crane is legal or not." The crowd was fully on Samuel's side now. Clara could see it. William had overplayed his hand, revealed too much, shown his true nature to people who might have helped him. "They're still my daughters," William said, but his voice had lost its strength. "I got rights." "You gave up those rights when you put them in danger," Samuel said. "But I'll tell you what. I'll buy those rights. Free and clear. Name your price." Clara's stomach dropped. "Samuel, no." $500, William said quickly, greed overcoming pride. "You give me $500, I'll sign papers saying the girls are yours, legal and binding." "Don't do this," Clara pleaded, grasping Samuel's arm. "Don't let him sell us again." Samuel looked at her, and in his eyes Clara saw understanding and apology and determination. "I'm not buying you, Clara. I'm buying him out. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes, because after this you'll be free. Legally, completely free. He'll have no claim, no rights, no ability to ever hurt you or Molly again. Isn't that worth $500? Clara wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to grab Molly and run somewhere their father could never find them. But she knew Samuel was right. As long as William had legal claim to them, they'd never be safe. He could always come back, always threaten, always hold that power over them. "All right," she whispered. Samuel turned back to William. $500, but not until you're in front of a judge with proper papers. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, at the courthouse in Redemption. You sign over all parental rights to Clara and Molly Whitmore. Then you get your money, and you leave this county, and you never come back. We got a deal?" William's eyes gleamed with avarice. "Deal!" "Tom, escort Mr. Whitmore to the hotel. Make sure he stays there until morning. He tries to leave town or cause trouble. You find the sheriff." Samuel pulled out a wad of bills and handed them to Tom. "Get him a room. Get him sober enough to stand before a judge. Whatever's left is yours." Tom nodded, taking William by the arm. Her father went without protest, already counting the money in his mind. The crowd dispersed slowly, whispering among themselves. Clara sat on Thunder, feeling numb, feeling like something had ended and something else had begun, but she didn't know what. Samuel moved to stand beside her horse, looking up at her with concern. "Clara, are you all right?" "I don't know. Am I?" She looked at Molly, who was crying silently on Willow. "Are we?" "Let's go home," Samuel said gently. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Molly rode between Clara and Samuel, her shoulders shaking with tears. Clara wanted to comfort her, wanted to tell her everything would be all right, but the words stuck in her throat. When they reached the ranch, Samuel helped Molly down from Willow, then surprised everyone by pulling her into a hug. "You're safe, Molly. I promise you're safe." Molly clung to him, sobbing into his shirt, and Clara felt something break open in her chest. This man who kept everyone at a distance, who hid behind books and work, was holding her sister like she mattered, like she was precious, like she was worth protecting. Later that night, after Molly had cried herself to sleep and Rosa had retired to her room, Clara found Samuel on the porch, staring out at the dark prairie. Thank you, she said, joining him at the railing, for what you did today, for protecting us. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to step in. You didn't have to offer $500. You didn't have to... Clara. Samuel turned to face her, his expression serious. I would pay any price to keep you and Molly safe, any price at all. You need to know that. Clara's breath caught. Why? Why do you care so much? Samuel was quiet for a long moment, the night sounds of the ranch filling the silence between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about obligation or guilt or making amends. Somewhere along the way, you and Molly became my family. This ranch, it was just a place before you came. Now it's a home. And I'll be damned if I let William Whitmore or anyone else take that away. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. Samuel, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. But Clara needed to say something, needed to name the feeling that had been growing in her chest for weeks, the feeling she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. I was wrong, she said softly, about love, about the risk being worth it. Samuel's eyes met hers, storm gray in the darkness. What do you mean? I mean, I think I'm falling for you, and it terrifies me. Because my mother loved my father and it destroyed her. Because love seems to break everything it touches. But when I'm with you, when we talk in your study or work side by side or share these quiet moments, I think maybe love doesn't have to be destruction. Maybe it can be home, Samuel finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, home. Samuel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. His touch was gentle, reverent, nothing like her father's brutal hands. Clara, I have loved you since the moment you stabbed that knife into the altar. Since you looked at me with fire in your eyes and refused to be anyone's property, I told myself it was respect, then admiration, then friendship. But I was lying to myself. It's been love all along. Clara leaned into his touch, her heart racing. What do we do now? Now? Now we take it slow. Now we build on what we've already started, trust, friendship, partnership. And when you're ready, if you're ready, maybe we stand in that church again. But this time, you'll be choosing me. Not because you have to, because you want to. And if I'm not ready for a long time, then I'll wait. I'd wait forever for you, Clara Whitmore. Clara closed the distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, filled with promise and possibility. Samuel's arms came around her, holding her like she was something precious, something chosen, something loved. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Clara rested her forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Tomorrow, she said, we go to the courthouse. We make sure my father can never hurt us again. And then we figure out the rest. Together. Together, Clara agreed. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Clara dressed carefully in one of the new dresses Samuel had bought for her, a simple green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Molly wore a new dress too, looking older than her 14 years, looking strong. They rode to Redemption together, Clara, Molly, Samuel, and Rosa. Tom met them at the courthouse with William, who looked rough but sober, his hands shaking with need for a drink. The judge was a stern woman named Margaret Thornton, Abigail's mother, who'd seen too many cases like this to have patience for fathers who failed their daughters. Mr. Whitmore, she said, shuffling through papers, you're here to relinquish all parental rights to Clara and Molly Whitmore. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you're doing this voluntarily, in exchange for payment from Mr. Duran? William's eyes flicked to Samuel, to the money visible in his pocket. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Thornton turned to Clara and Molly. Girls, do you consent to this arrangement? Do you wish to be free of your father's authority? Yes, Clara said firmly. Yes, Molly echoed. Very well. Judge Thornton pushed the papers toward William. Sign here, here, and here. Be aware that once you sign, you have no legal claim to these girls. They are free to make their own decisions, choose their own guardians, and live their own lives. You cannot contact them, cannot demand money from them, cannot exert any control over them. Is that understood? Understood, William muttered, scrawling his signature. When it was done, Samuel counted out $500 and placed it on the table. William grabbed it with shaking hands, not even looking at his daughters as he hurried from the courtroom. Judge Thornton stamped the papers and handed copies to Clara. "You're free now, both of you. Use that freedom wisely." Outside the courthouse, Clara stood in the sunshine, holding the papers that proved she and Molly belonged to no one but themselves. Molly hugged her tight, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. "We're free," Molly whispered. "Clara, we're really free." "Yes, baby, we're free." Samuel and Rosa gave them space, standing a few feet away, but Clara saw Samuel watching with an expression of quiet joy. She walked over to him, Molly's hand still clasped in hers. "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything." "You're welcome, for everything." Samuel smiled. "Now, what do you say we go home?" "Home," Clara repeated, and the word had never felt so right. As they rode back to the ranch, Clara thought about how far she'd come from that day in the church, from the moment she'd stabbed a knife into the altar and declared herself free. She'd thought freedom was just about escaping her father, about having a place to sleep and food to eat. But real freedom, she was learning, was about choosing who you loved, choosing who you trusted, choosing what kind of life you wanted to build. And she was choosing Samuel, choosing this ranch, choosing a future she was building one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in her life, Clara Whitmore was the one writing it. The weeks following the courthouse became a season of transformation. The ranch settled into rhythms that felt less like obligation and more like belonging. Clara woke each morning not with the dread of survival, but with something she was still learning to name: anticipation for the day ahead, for the work that gave her purpose, for the moment stolen with Samuel between the demands of running a ranch. But freedom, Clara discovered, came with its own complications. Without her father's shadow looming over them, without the constant threat of being dragged back to Deadhorse, she and Molly had to figure out who they were beyond just survivors. The question of identity proved harder to answer than she'd expected. It was Rosa who noticed first, of course. She had a way of seeing through Clara's carefully constructed composure to the uncertainty beneath. "You're restless," Rosa observed one morning as they worked in the kitchen, preparing food for the ranch hands. "Like a horse that's been let out of the corral but doesn't know where to run." Clara kneaded bread dough with more force than necessary. "I'm fine." "See, and I'm the Queen of England." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron. "You have what you wanted: freedom, safety, a home, but now you don't know what to do with it." Clara's hands stilled. For 17 years, Clara's entire existence had been about survival, protecting Molly, enduring her father, dreaming of escape. Now that she'd escaped, now that they were safe, the purpose that had driven her every action was gone. She felt untethered, adrift in a life she hadn't planned for because she'd never believed she'd have it. "I don't know who I am," Clara admitted quietly. "Without something to fight against, without someone to protect Molly from, I don't know what I'm supposed to be." Rosa moved to stand beside her, her weathered hand covering Clara's flour-dusted one. "Then you get to decide. That's the gift of freedom, mija. You're not what your father made you. You're not what circumstances forced you to be. You're whoever you choose to become." "But what if I choose wrong?" "Then you choose again." Life isn't one decision, Clara. It's 1,000 small choices every day. Some you'll regret, some you'll celebrate, but they're all yours to make. The conversation stayed with Clara as she went about her day. She watched Samuel working with the ranch hands in the distance, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his commands clear and respected. She saw Molly riding Willow across the pasture, her laughter carried on the wind. She looked at the ranch house that had become home, at the life taking shape around her, and realized Rosa was right. She had to choose who she wanted to be. That evening, she found Samuel in his study as usual, but instead of bringing supper, she brought a question. "Teach me," she said without preamble. Samuel looked up from his ledgers, surprise crossing his face. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How to run this ranch, not just the household, the whole operation. The cattle, the land, the business. I want to learn it all." Samuel sat back in his chair, studying her with those storm cloud eyes. Why? Because I need to know I can survive without you. Not because I plan to leave, Clara added quickly, seeing his expression shift, but because I need to know I could if I had to. I need to know I'm not dependent on anyone for my survival ever again. Understanding dawned on Samuel's face. You want independence. I want competence. I want to be useful beyond cooking and cleaning. I want to be a partner, not just a... She struggled for the word. A kept woman? Samuel's voice was gentle, not accusatory. Yes. I know that's not what this is, not what you intended, but sometimes it feels like I'm just playing a different role in a different house. I want to be more than that. Samuel stood and crossed to where she stood by the door. Clara, you've never been just anything to me, but I understand what you're asking, and I'll teach you. Not because you need to prove your worth, you've already done that 100 times over, but because you have a right to know everything about the life you're choosing to build here. Relief flooded through Clara. When do we start? Tomorrow, Dawn. Wear boots you don't mind getting dirty. The first lesson is fixing fence line, and it's not pretty work. Clara smiled. I grew up in a shack with a father who drank himself unconscious most nights. I think I can handle fence posts. Samuel laughed, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that had become familiar between them, intimate without being presumptuous. I don't doubt that for a second. The next morning, Clara met Samuel at the stables before sunrise. He'd saddled Thunder for her and Zeus for himself, and they rode out toward the eastern pasture as the sky turned from black to deep purple to gold. Ranching, Samuel said as they rode, is 90% preparation and maintenance, 9% crisis management, and 1% actually enjoying the fruits of your labor. Most people think it's romantic, cowboys and cattle drives and wide open spaces. The reality is mending fences, counting cows, and worrying about weather. Sounds terrible, Clara said dryly. Why do you do it? Samuel was quiet for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the prairie that stretched endlessly in every direction. Because this land doesn't lie to you. It doesn't promise what it can't deliver. It's hard and unforgiving, but it's honest. You put in the work, you might get rewarded. You slack off, you'll pay for it. There's something clean about that kind of truth. They reached the fence line, and Samuel dismounted, showing Clara how to test each post for stability, how to recognize rot, how to replace damaged sections. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, and Clara watched carefully, memorizing every step. Your turn, Samuel said, handing her the tools. Clara's first attempts were clumsy. She hit her thumb with the hammer, struggled to get the post at the right angle, and nearly dropped the wire cutters twice. But Samuel was patient, correcting her grip, steadying her hands with his own, encouraging her when frustration made her want to throw the hammer into the grass. It's harder than it looks, Clara panted, finally securing a post properly. Everything worth doing is. But look, you did it. That fence will hold because you made it hold. Clara looked at the post, at the work of her own hands, and felt a surge of pride. It was such a small thing, one section of fence on a ranch that stretched for miles, but it was hers. She'd done it. Over the following weeks, Samuel taught her everything. How to read the weather and the clouds, how to spot a sick cow before symptoms became critical, how to calculate feed costs and profit margins. He showed her the water rights documents, explained the complicated relationships with neighboring ranchers, taught her to shoot a rifle accurately enough to scare off predators. You're a natural, Samuel said one afternoon, watching Clara successfully separate a heifer from the herd. You think like a rancher, always 3 steps ahead, always planning for disaster. That's just how I survived my father, always anticipating his moods, always ready to grab Molly and hide. Samuel's expression darkened. I'm sorry those skills were necessary, but I'm not sorry you have them now because they'll serve you well here. But it wasn't just Clara who was changing. Molly was blossoming in ways that both delighted and terrified her older sister. She'd found friends at school, real friends who saw past her history to the sharp, funny, kind girl beneath. She excelled in her studies, bringing home marks that made Miss Thornton beam with pride, and she was becoming confident in a way that made Clara's protective instincts flare. There's a dance next month, Molly announced one evening at supper, her cheeks flushed with excitement. A harvest dance at the school. Everyone's going. Clara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Everyone? Well, all the students and their families. Miss Thornton says it's tradition. Molly's eyes were bright with hope. Can I go? Please? Clara looked at Samuel, who was carefully buttering his bread, clearly staying out of this conversation. Rosa, on the other hand, was watching with undisguised amusement. I don't know, Molly. A dance means, boys, I know. But Clara, I'm 14 now, and I promise I'll be careful. I'll stay with my friends. I won't do anything stupid, and you can come too if you want a chaperone. The thought of chaperoning a school dance made Clara want to hide in the root cellar. But the thought of Molly going alone made her stomach twist with anxiety. Her little sister wasn't so little anymore, and the world was full of dangers Clara knew too well. Let her go, Samuel said quietly. Clara turned to him, surprised. Samuel, she deserves to be a normal girl, to have normal experiences. You've protected her from so much, Clara, but you can't protect her from growing up. He's right, Mija, Rosa added. And besides, Molly is smart. You raised her to be smart. Trust that. Molly's eyes pleaded with Clara across the table, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. Her sister wasn't a child anymore, wasn't someone who needed constant protection. She was becoming her own person, and Clara had to let her. All right, Clara said, her voice tight. You can go, but I'm going with you. Molly squealed and jumped up to hug Clara. Thank you, and Clara, you should dance too, with Mr. Duran. Clara felt her cheeks heat. We're not. Everyone knows you're courting, Molly said matter-of-factly. The whole town talks about it, how romantic it is, how Mr. Duran saved us, how you fell in love. The whole town needs to mind its own business, Clara muttered, but she caught Samuel's eye across the table and saw him trying not to smile. Later that night, Clara found herself once again on the porch with Samuel, the place that had become theirs for stolen conversations under the stars. So the whole town thinks we're courting, Clara said, leaning against the railing. Apparently so. Samuel stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Does that bother you? I don't know. Maybe I just don't like being the subject of gossip. We could give them something real to gossip about. Clara's breath caught. What do you mean? Samuel turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I mean, we could actually court, properly, with intention. I could take you to church socials and town dances. I could hold your hand in public and call you my sweetheart. I could make it clear to everyone that you're not my employee or my charity case or anything else they want to whisper about. You'd be the woman I'm courting with the hope of marriage. Clara's heart raced. Samuel, we've talked about taking things slow. I know, and we can still take it slow. Courting doesn't mean rushing to the altar. It just means being honest about what we're building here, about what I feel for you and what I hope you feel for me. Clara looked at this man who'd saved her, who'd taught her, who'd been patient beyond measure. She thought about the life they were building, about the partnership forming between them, about the way her heart lifted every time she heard his voice. I do feel something for you, she admitted, something that terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. But Samuel, I'm still figuring out who I am. I don't want to lose myself in you the way my mother lost herself in my father. You won't, because I don't want you to lose yourself either. I fell in love with a woman who stabbed a knife into an altar, who fought for her sister, who demanded to learn ranching because she refused to be dependent. I don't want you to change. I want you to become more of who you already are. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. Love never is. But it doesn't have to be destructive either. It can be partnership, Clara finished. You said that before the night you taught me to fix fence posts, that marriage at its best is partnership. And I meant it. Elizabeth and I, we were partners. We built this ranch together, made decisions together, fought, and made up and dreamed together. That's what I want again. Not someone to cook my meals and warm my bed, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't want those things too eventually. But first and foremost, I want a partner, an equal. Clara wiped at her eyes, laughing a little at herself. When did I become someone who cries? When you let yourself feel things instead of just surviving them. Samuel reached out, his thumb brushing away a tear she'd missed. So what do you say, Clara Whitmore? Will you let me court you properly? Will you give us a real chance? Clara looked into his storm cloud eyes, at the hope and vulnerability there, and made another choice in the long line of choices that were shaping her new life. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll court you. But Samuel, I need you to know I'm still scared. I'm scared I'll wake up one day and this will all be gone. Or worse, that it'll turn into something ugly like my parents' marriage." "I'm scared too," Samuel admitted. "I'm scared I'll lose you the way I lost Elizabeth. I'm scared I'll fail you somehow. But I think maybe the bravest thing we can do is be scared together and choose each other anyway." Clara closed the distance between them, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him with all the fear and hope and love she'd been holding back. Samuel pulled her close, his hands splayed across her back, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this: the warmth of his embrace, the steadiness of his heartbeat, the promise of something worth choosing. The next Sunday, Samuel drove Clara to church in Redemption, the first time they'd appeared together publicly since the courthouse. Clara wore her best dress, the green one that Samuel loved, and Samuel wore a suit that made him look almost formal, though his hands still bore the calluses of ranch work. They arrived to stares and whispers, which Clara had expected. What she hadn't expected was the way Samuel helped her down from the wagon, offered her his arm, and walked into that church like he was proud to have her beside him. Reverend Walsh, not the same Reverend from Dead Horse, but a kindly man named John Walsh, who'd replaced his father, welcomed them with a warm smile. "Mr. Duran, Miss Whitmore, wonderful to see you both." "Reverend," Samuel said, shaking his hand, "I wanted to speak with you after service, about posting banns." Clara's head whipped toward him. "Samuel." He looked at her with barely concealed amusement. "Relax, not marriage banns, courting intentions. It's traditional to let the church know when you're courting with serious intent. Keeps things proper." Clara wanted to strangle him and kiss him simultaneously. "You could have warned me." "Where's the fun in that?" They sat through the service, Clara acutely aware of every eye that drifted toward them, every whispered conversation behind gloved hands. But Samuel seemed unbothered, and gradually Clara relaxed. Let them look. Let them whisper. She'd done nothing wrong, and she refused to be ashamed of finding happiness. After the service, as people milled about outside the church, several women approached Clara with varying degrees of warmth. Some were genuinely friendly, pleased to see Samuel moving on from his grief. Others were clearly fishing for gossip, asking pointed questions about the arrangement at the ranch. It was Mrs. Fletcher, wife of the rancher whose land bordered Samuel's, who pushed too far. "It must be quite comfortable," she said, her smile sharp as a knife, "living in that big house with Mr. Duran, and without any proper supervision, I hear, just you, your sister, and that Mexican housekeeper." Clara felt her temper flare, but before she could respond, another voice cut in, cool and authoritative. "I think you'll find Rosa Martinez has provided more than adequate supervision, Mrs. Fletcher, as has my mother." Clara turned to find Abigail Thornton, Molly's teacher, standing with her mother, Judge Margaret Thornton. Both women wore expressions that could freeze fire. "Judge Thornton," Mrs. Fletcher stammered, "I didn't mean to imply—" "You implied that Clara's reputation was compromised by living under Mr. Duran's roof," Judge Thornton said crisply. "But Clara is a free woman, making her own choices, with proper chaperonage and honest employment. Unless you have evidence of impropriety, I suggest you keep your insinuations to yourself." Mrs. Fletcher paled. "Of course. I apologize if I spoke out of turn." She scurried away, and Clara felt a rush of gratitude toward the Thorntons. Abigail touched Clara's arm gently. "Don't let the gossips get to you. Most of the town thinks what Samuel did, paying your father's debt, giving you and Molly a home, letting you choose your own path, was heroic. There will always be people like Mrs. Fletcher who can't see past their own narrow worldview." "Thank you," Clara said sincerely. "Both of you." "Molly is a remarkable student," Abigail said, changing the subject. "She's reading at a level far beyond her peers. Have you considered her future? College, perhaps?" Clara blinked. College had never been a possibility she'd imagined, not for herself and certainly not for Molly. We haven't talked about it." "You should. She's bright enough for it, and there are schools that take female students now. It's something to think about." As the Thorntons moved on to greet other parishioners, Clara felt dazed. College, a future beyond just survival, beyond even the ranch. What else hadn't she allowed herself to imagine? Samuel appeared at her elbow. "You all right? You look like someone hit you with a fence post." "Miss Thornton thinks Molly should go to college." "Of course she should. Molly's brilliant." "Samuel, college costs money. A lot of money. And it would mean her leaving, going somewhere far away." "Clara." Samuel turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If Molly wants college, we'll find a way. But right now she's 14 and happy. Let's not borrow tomorrow's worries today." Clara nodded, but the seed had been planted. Molly deserved everything: education, opportunity, choices. Clara would make sure she had them, no matter what it took. The harvest dance arrived with the changing of the seasons. The school had been transformed with bunting and lanterns, and a small band played cheerful music that drifted across the town square. Clara stood at the edge of the gathering, watching Molly laugh with her friends, watching couples dance, feeling both part of this community and separate from it. "You're brooding," Samuel said, appearing with 2 cups of punch. "I'm observing." "You're brooding. I can tell because you get this little crease right here." He touched the spot between her eyebrows gently. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's just different. Good different, but strange. 6 months ago, I was living in a shack expecting to be sold to Silas Crane, or worse. Now I'm at a dance, watching my sister be happy, courting a man I—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "A man you what?" Samuel's voice was soft, hopeful. Clara took a breath, gathering her courage. "A man I love, I think. I'm not sure I know what love is supposed to feel like. But if it's this feeling like my chest might crack open, like I'm terrified and exhilarated at once, like I'd do anything to keep you safe and happy, then yes, I love you." Samuel's expression transformed, joy breaking across his face like sunrise. "Clara, don't say anything yet. Let me just have this moment of being brave before I panic about what it means." Samuel laughed, setting down the punch cups and taking both her hands in his. "All right, but when you're done panicking, I need you to know that I love you too. Have loved you for months now, and I have no intention of letting you forget it." He pulled her onto the dance floor, ignoring her protests that she didn't know how to dance properly. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. "Trust me." Clara did trust him, she realized as they moved together to the music. She trusted him with her safety, her sister's future, her heart. The knowledge was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. They danced through 3 songs before Molly interrupted, her face flushed with excitement. "Clara, Mr. Duran, you have to see this. There's a photographer here taking pictures for the school. We could get one taken, all of us together." The idea of having a photograph, something permanent, proof that this life was real, appealed to Clara more than she'd expected. "All right, let's do it." They gathered with Rosa, who'd been watching from the sidelines, and posed for the photographer. The flash powder went off with a pop and a brilliant light, capturing them frozen in that moment. Samuel's hand on Clara's waist, Molly leaning against Clara's other side, Rosa standing proud and protective behind them all. "You'll have to come to my studio in a week to collect it," the photographer said. "But I must say, you make a handsome family." Family. The word settled over Clara like a warm blanket. They were a family now, not by blood or by law, but by choice. They'd chosen each other, built something together from broken pieces and desperate chances. As the evening wound down and they rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Molly fell asleep against Clara's shoulder. Rosa dozed in the back of the wagon, and Samuel drove with the reins loose in his hands, Zeus knowing the way home. "Samuel," Clara said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "I'm listening. I'm happy, truly happy, and it scares me because I keep waiting for it to be taken away. I keep waiting for the other boot to drop, for disaster to strike, for this to end badly." "That's not happiness talking. That's trauma. Your father taught you that good things don't last, that happiness is always followed by pain." "Wasn't he right? Look at you and Elizabeth. Elizabeth and I had 10 beautiful years. Yes, it ended in tragedy, and yes, I nearly died from grief. but I survived. And I found you. Maybe that's the lesson. Not that happiness is temporary, but that we're stronger than we think. That we can survive loss and find joy again. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, careful not to disturb Molly. What if I'm not that strong? You are. You've already proven it 100 times over. And Clara, even if the worst happens, even if we lose everything tomorrow, we'll have had this. These moments, this love, this family we've built. No one can take that away, not even death. Clara let his words sink in, let herself believe them. Maybe happiness didn't have to be followed by tragedy. Maybe the story her father had written for her didn't have to be the only story. Maybe she could write a new one, with Samuel, with Molly, with the family they were becoming. The ranch appeared on the horizon, lamplight glowing in the windows like a beacon calling them home. Home. The word still felt new on Clara's tongue, still carried the weight of miracle. As they pulled into the yard, Molly stirred, blinking sleepily. Are we home? Yes, baby, we're home. They climbed down from the wagon, Samuel carrying the still drowsy Molly, while Clara helped Rosa. The house welcomed them with warmth and light, with the smell of cinnamon from the morning's baking, with the comfortable clutter of lives being lived. Clara stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Samuel carry Molly upstairs, watching Rosa bank the fire in the kitchen, feeling the weight of contentment settle in her bones. This was her life now, not perfect, not without fear or uncertainty, but hers, chosen, built with her own hands and her own courage. You coming to bed? Samuel called from the stairs. Clara smiled. In a minute. I just want to stand here a bit longer. Don't stand too long. The night's getting cold. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, looking out at the prairie stretching dark and vast beyond the porch. The land that had seemed so hostile, so unforgiving when she'd first arrived, now felt like possibility. She understood what Samuel meant about the prairie being honest. It demanded everything from you, but it gave back in equal measure if you were willing to work for it. She thought about this girl she'd been 6 months ago, desperate, angry, willing to stab a knife into an altar rather than surrender her autonomy. That girl was still inside her, still fierce and protective and unwilling to be owned. But she'd grown into something more. A woman who could love without losing herself, who could trust without abandoning caution, who could build a future instead of just surviving the present. Rosa appeared beside her, wrapping a shawl around Clara's shoulders. Come inside, mija. The prairie will still be there tomorrow. Rosa, can I ask you something? Always. Were you scared? When you came here, when you started working for Samuel and Elizabeth, were you scared of hoping for good things? Rosa was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant with memory. Terrified. I came here running from a bad marriage, from a man who thought his fists were the answer to everything. Samuel and Elizabeth, they offered me safety, respect, a home. And yes, I was scared every day that I'd wake up and it would be gone, that I'd be back where I started. What changed? Time and trust, and realizing that fear was keeping me from really living. One day Elizabeth said to me, Rosa, you're so busy protecting yourself from potential pain that you're missing the actual joy right in front of you. She was right. So I let myself be happy. I let myself love them, love this place, love this life. And when Elizabeth died, yes, it hurt. It hurt like hell. But I don't regret a single moment of loving her. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so scared of losing this, of losing him. I know, mija. But you'll lose it anyway if you don't let yourself fully have it. Fear is a thief that steals the present while pretending to protect the future. Rosa squeezed her shoulder. Love him. Let him love you. Let yourself have this family, this home, this happiness. Whatever comes later, at least you'll have lived. Clara hugged Rosa tight, this woman who'd become so much more than a housekeeper, who'd become family in the truest sense. Thank you. Now come inside before you freeze and I have to explain to Senor Duran why I let his sweetheart turn into an icicle. They went inside together, Rosa heading to her room and Clara climbing the stairs to her own. But she paused at Samuel's door, seeing the light still glowing beneath it. She knocked softly. Come in. Samuel sat on the edge of his bed, removing his boots. He looked up when Clara entered, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. Everything all right? I've been thinking. About? Clara closed the door behind her and leaned against it, gathering her courage. About what you said at the dance. About loving me. About us building something together. Samuel set his boot down carefully. And I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to let fear keep me from what I want. I love you, Samuel Duran. I love this life we're building. I love the family we've become. And I want more of it. I want to marry you. Not because I have to, not because it's convenient, but because I choose you. I choose us. Samuel stood slowly, crossing to her in 3 long strides. His hands cupped her face, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure? Really sure? Because Clara, if we do this, I'm in it forever. For better or worse, in sickness and health until death parts us. I won't let you go easily. I don't want easy. I want real. I want you. Samuel kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. We'll do it right this time, he said. A proper proposal, a proper wedding, with you walking down that aisle because you want to, not because you're being forced. I want to. God help me, I want to. Samuel laughed, the sound full of joy and relief and love. Then we'll make it happen. But right now, you should go to your room before I forget I'm a gentleman and ask you to stay. Clara blushed, but smiled. Soon enough, I won't have to leave. No, you won't. Soon enough, this will be our room, our bed, our life. Clara kissed him once more, soft and sweet, then slipped out of his room and into her own. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing with excitement and terror and overwhelming love. She was getting married, by choice, to a man she loved, in a home that was hers, with a future that was wide open with possibility. The girl who'd stabbed a knife into an altar had found something worth more than freedom. She'd found someone worth choosing, someone worth building a life with, someone worth the risk of love. Clara fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of white dresses and spoken vows and a future that was finally, blessedly, hers to write. The morning after Clara's declaration brought a clarity she hadn't expected. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of Samuel's voice drifting up from downstairs, talking with Rosa about the day's work. Everything was the same as it had been yesterday, yet everything was different. She'd chosen her future, and the weight of that choice sat on her chest, not heavy with dread, but solid with certainty. She dressed quickly and descended to find Samuel at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. Rosa pretended not to notice the way they looked at each other, but Clara caught the older woman's knowing smile as she turned back to the stove. "Morning," Samuel said, the simple word carrying layers of meaning. "Morning," Clara replied, taking the chair beside him rather than across from him, a small change that felt monumental. Molly burst through the door from outside, her cheeks flushed from feeding the chickens. "It's Saturday! No school! Can we ride to the creek today, please? The weather's perfect and—" She stopped, looking between Clara and Samuel. "What happened? You both look weird." "We don't look weird," Clara protested. "You're glowing, both of you. It's unnatural." Molly narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Did something happen last night after the dance?" Rosa laughed from the stove. "Your sister has agreed to marry Señor Duran, properly this time." Molly's shriek of delight nearly shattered the windows. She launched herself at Clara, wrapping her arms around her sister's neck. "Really? You're getting married? For real?" "For real," Clara confirmed, hugging Molly tight. "If you approve." "If I approve?" "Clara, I've been hoping for this since the day we got here. Mr. Duran is... Samuel is..." Molly turned to Samuel, suddenly serious. "You'll be good to her, won't you? Because if you're not, I'll..." "You'll what?" Samuel asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. "I don't know yet, but it'll be terrible. I'm very creative when I'm angry." Samuel stood and faced Molly with the same gravity she'd shown him. "I promise you, Molly Whitmore, I will spend every day of the rest of my life being worthy of your sister. And if I fail, you have my permission to be as terrible as you can imagine." Molly studied him for a moment, then nodded decisively. "All right then. I approve. When's the wedding?" Clara looked at Samuel, realizing they hadn't discussed details. "We haven't exactly planned that far." "Soon," Samuel said firmly. "I've waited long enough. Unless you want a big production?" Months of planning, fancy dress, half the county invited. The thought made Clara's stomach turn. No, small. Just us and the people who matter. Then we can marry as soon as Reverend Walsh can arrange it. A week? 2? Clara's heart raced. A week. 2 weeks at most, and she'd be Clara Duran. The name felt foreign and right at the same time. 2 weeks. That gives us time to, I don't know, prepare, whatever that means. Rosa set plates of breakfast on the table with decisive authority. It means I make your dress. It means we clean this house until it shines. It means we invite the right people and make sure everyone knows this is a choice, not an obligation. It means we do this properly. You don't have to make a dress, Rosa. I can wear... You will not wear that blue dress again. You will have a wedding dress, a beautiful one, and I will make it. This is not a discussion. Clara opened her mouth to argue, saw the set of Rosa's jaw, and wisely closed it again. Thank you, Rosa. Samuel reached across the table and took Clara's hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. We should ride into redemption today. Talk to Reverend Walsh, make it official. And Clara, we need to discuss something else. What? Your father. He signed away his rights, but he's still in the territory. We need to decide if we want to tell him about the wedding or let him find out through town gossip. The mention of William Whitmore sent a chill through the warm kitchen. Clara had almost managed to forget about him, to pretend he'd disappeared into the bottom of a bottle somewhere far away. But Samuel was right. Her father was still out there, still capable of causing trouble. I don't want him there, Clara said firmly. I don't want him anywhere near our wedding day. Then he won't be. But he'll hear about it eventually, and I want you to be prepared for that, for whatever reaction he might have. Molly's hand found Clara's free one, squeezing tight. He can't hurt us anymore. The judge said so. Legally, no, Samuel agreed. But your father is a bitter man, and bitter men do stupid things. I just want everyone to be careful, to be aware. The shadow of William Whitmore passed over their celebration like a cloud across the sun, but Clara refused to let it linger. She'd spent too many years living in fear of her father's moods, his violence, his ability to destroy anything good. Not anymore. Let him hear about it, Clara said. Let him know I'm happy, that we're both happy, that his worst efforts to break us failed. Maybe it'll eat at him. I hope it does. Samuel's expression was troubled. Clara, I know. I know that's not charitable or Christian or whatever I'm supposed to feel, but Samuel, he tried to sell me to Silas Crane. He would have done the same to Molly. I can't forgive that. I won't. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm just asking you to be careful. Desperate men are dangerous men. They finished breakfast with the conversation turning to lighter topics, wedding details, guest lists, whether to have the ceremony at the church or the ranch. But Clara's mind kept drifting back to her father, to the unfinished business between them, to the nagging fear that he'd find a way to ruin this too. The ride to redemption was beautiful. Autumn was settling over the prairie in shades of gold and amber, the air crisp and clean. Samuel and Clara rode side by side, close enough that their legs occasionally brushed, each touch sending warmth through Clara despite the cooling weather. Nervous? Samuel asked as the town came into view. Terrified. You? Absolutely. But the good kind of terrified, the kind that means something matters. They found Reverend Walsh at the church, sweeping leaves from the front steps. He looked up at their approach and smiled warmly. Mr. Duran, Miss Whitmore, what brings you to town on this fine Saturday? We'd like to discuss a wedding, Samuel said, dismounting and helping Clara down. Ours. Reverend Walsh's smile widened. I was wondering when you two would make it official. Come inside, let's talk. They settled in the Reverend's modest office, and Clara was struck by how different this felt from that day in Dead Horse, the day she'd stabbed a knife into the altar. Then, she'd been desperate, trapped, fighting for her freedom. Now, she was here by choice, planning a future instead of escaping a past. I assume this time the bride is willing? Reverend Walsh asked with gentle humor. Very willing, Clara confirmed. We were hoping you could marry us in 2 weeks. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. 2 weeks. The Reverend consulted a calendar on his desk. That would be the 15th. I can do that. Saturday afternoon work for you both? Perfect, Samuel said. They discussed details. time, readings, vows. Clara found herself actually paying attention this time, actually caring about the words that would bind her to Samuel. When the Reverend asked if they wanted to write their own vows, Clara and Samuel exchanged a look. "Yes," Clara said. "I want to say my own words this time." After they'd settled everything with Reverend Walsh, they walked through town together. News of their engagement had somehow already spread, small towns being what they were, and people called out congratulations from doorways and storefronts. Most seemed genuinely happy, though Clara caught a few disapproving looks from the Mrs. Fletchers of the world. "Let's get you a ring," Samuel said, steering her toward the jewelers. "Samuel, I don't need—" "Yes, you do. You need a ring that says you chose this, that you're proud to be my wife. Humor me." The jeweler, a kind man named Mr. Chen who'd come from San Francisco, showed them his selection. Most were ornate, covered in filigree and stones that seemed too delicate for ranch life. But then Clara spotted a simple gold band with a small diamond set flush with the metal. Practical, beautiful, meant to last. "That one," she said. Samuel slipped it on her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the light from the shop window. "You're sure? You can have any of these." "I'm sure." "This is the one." Samuel bought the ring, along with a matching band for himself, something that surprised Clara. "You'll wear one too?" "Of course. Why should you be the only one marked as married? I want everyone to know I'm spoken for." They left the jewelers with the ring secured in a small velvet box, and Clara kept touching her pocket to make sure it was still there, solid and real. She was engaged, actually, truly engaged, to marry a man she loved. They were heading back to their horses when a voice stopped them cold. "Well, well, if it ain't my daughter and her savior." Clara froze. She knew that voice, slurred and bitter, hated and familiar. She turned slowly to find William Whitmore leaning against the wall of the saloon, a bottle in his hand, his clothes even more ragged than when she'd last seen him. Samuel's hand moved to Clara's elbow, steadying. "Whitmore, you're still in town. Free country, ain't it? Man can drink where he pleases." William's bloodshot eyes fixed on Clara. "Heard some interesting news today. My daughter's getting married. To you. Funny, I thought she already refused that honor once." "Things change," Clara said, forcing her voice steady. "I changed my mind." "Changed your mind? Sure you did. Or maybe he just wore you down, convinced you that being his whore was better than starving." Samuel moved in front of Clara, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Watch your mouth, Whitmore." "Or what? You'll hit me? Go ahead. Show your precious Clara what kind of man you really are." "I'm not going to hit you. I'm going to walk away with my fiancé, and you're going to let us. Because if you don't, if you keep spreading lies about Clara's character, I'll make sure every saloon in this territory knows you tried to sell your daughters to Silas Crane. See how many bartenders want to serve a man like that." William's face went pale, then red with rage. "You got no proof of that." "I've got the paperwork from Judge Thornton. I've got witnesses who heard you negotiating the deal. I've got everything I need to destroy what little reputation you have left. The only reason I haven't is because Clara asked me not to, because she's a better person than you deserve." Clara stepped out from behind Samuel, facing her father directly. "You have no power over me anymore. Not legal, not emotional, not any kind. I'm marrying Samuel because I love him, because I choose him, because he's shown me what it means to be treated with respect and kindness, things you never understood. I'm your father. You stopped being my father when you sold me to pay your debts. You're nothing to me now. Nothing." William lunged forward, but Samuel caught him easily, shoving him back against the saloon wall. "Touch her, and I'll break your arm. This is your last warning. Stay away from Clara, stay away from Molly, stay away from our ranch. You've got no claim to them anymore." A small crowd had gathered, watching the confrontation. Clara saw the sheriff approaching, a tall man named Tom Brady who'd been in the job for 20 years and had no patience for troublemakers. "We got a problem here?" Sheriff Brady asked. "No problem, Sheriff," Samuel said, releasing William. "Mr. Whitmore was just leaving." "That right, Whitmore? You leaving?" William straightened his filthy coat, trying to salvage some dignity. Yeah, I'm leaving, but this ain't over. She's my blood, and you can't change that with a piece of paper and a wedding ring." The blood means nothing when it's poisoned, Clara said. Goodbye, Pa. I hope I never see you again. She turned and walked away, Samuel at her side, leaving her father raging impotently behind them. Her hands were shaking, her heart pounding, but she felt strangely liberated. She'd faced William Whitmore, not as a frightened daughter, but as a woman who'd found her strength, her voice, her power. They rode home in silence, the encounter with William casting a pall over their earlier joy. But as the ranch came into view, as Clara saw the house with smoke curling from the chimney and Molly practicing her riding in the corral, something settled in her chest. He can't touch this, she said aloud. Whatever he does, whatever he says, he can't touch what we've built here. Samuel reached across the distance between their horses and took her hand. No, he can't. This is ours, Clara. Ours to protect, ours to nurture, ours to grow. He's got no place in it. That evening, after supper, Rosa pulled Clara aside. I need to measure you for the dress. Come. They went to Rosa's room, a space Clara had rarely entered. It was simple but personal, filled with photographs and mementos from Rosa's life. On the dresser sat a picture of a younger Rosa with Samuel and a beautiful woman who could only be Elizabeth. That's her, Rosa said, noticing Clara's gaze. Elizabeth. You remind me of her, you know. The same fire, the same refusal to be less than you are. Samuel's told me about her, how much he loved her. He did. He does still, in a way. But Clara, the heart is not a finite thing. It grows to hold what it needs to hold. Samuel loving Elizabeth doesn't diminish what he feels for you. If anything, it proves he knows how to love deeply, how to be a good husband. Rosa began taking measurements, her hands quick and practiced. I've been saving fabric, she said. Good fabric from San Francisco. I bought it years ago, thinking maybe one day, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. It's yours now, for your wedding dress. Rosa, I can't take your... You can and you will. Let an old woman have the joy of dressing a bride, mija. I never had daughters of my own. Let me do this. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. For everything. For being family when we had none. Rosa cupped Clara's face, her weathered hands gentle. You gave me family, too. This house was so quiet after Elizabeth died. Samuel was like a ghost. I was like a ghost. We were all just haunting the place. Then you came with your fire and your sister and your refusal to be broken. You brought us back to life. Over the next 2 weeks, the ranch transformed into a hive of activity. Rosa sewed the wedding dress in secret, refusing to let Clara see it until the day. Molly helped clean and decorate, bringing in wild flowers from the prairie to fill every available vase. Samuel worked on the ranch with renewed energy, fixing everything that needed fixing, wanting the place to be perfect. Clara found herself caught between excitement and fear. She'd catch herself smiling for no reason, then remembering her father's bitter face in town, then forcing herself back to joy. It was exhausting, this constant battle between past and future, between trauma and hope. 3 days before the wedding, Molly came to Clara's room late at night, her face troubled. Can't sleep? Clara asked, patting the bed beside her. Molly climbed in, curling against Clara like she used to when she was small. I'm scared. Of what? Of things changing, of losing you to Samuel. I know that's selfish, but Clara, you've been my whole world for so long. What if once you're married, you don't need me anymore? Clara's heart broke. She wrapped her arms around her sister, holding her tight. Molly, listen to me. You are my sister, my family, my heart. Marriage doesn't change that. Samuel doesn't replace you. He joins us. We're not losing anything. We're gaining. Promise? I promise. You're stuck with me forever, whether you like it or not. And Molly, Samuel loves you too. You know that, right? He thinks of you as family already. I know. I just needed to hear you say it, that I still matter. You'll always matter, always. They fell asleep like that, curled together, and Clara thought about how love multiplied rather than divided. She loved Molly with her whole heart, and she loved Samuel with her whole heart, and somehow there was room for both, room for more, room for the family they were becoming. The day before the wedding, Judge Thornton and Abigail came to the ranch with news that turned Clara's blood to ice. There's been an incident, Judge Thornton said without preamble. William Whitmore was arrested last night for drunk and disorderly conduct. He's in jail, but he'll be released this morning. Why are you telling us this? Samuel asked, though Clara could see he already knew. Because he was ranting about the wedding, about how it was illegal, how Clara was being coerced, how he was going to stop it. Sheriff Brady wanted you to know, wanted you to be prepared in case Whitmore tries something. Clara's hands clenched into fists. He can't stop it. He has no legal right. He has no legal right, Judge Thornton agreed. But he could make a scene at the church. He could try to disrupt the ceremony. I'm not saying he will, but he might. Samuel's jaw tightened. Then we'll be ready. Thank you for the warning, Judge. After the Thorntons left, Samuel turned to Clara. We could postpone. Wait until Whitmore leaves town. No. Clara's voice was firm. I won't let him control my life anymore. We're getting married tomorrow, as planned. If he shows up, we'll deal with it, together. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, looking out at the prairie silvered by moonlight, thinking about tomorrow, about becoming a wife, about the vows she'd written and rewritten a dozen times, about the life she was choosing. A knock at her door made her turn. Come in. Samuel entered, and Clara's breath caught. It was the night before their wedding. They shouldn't be alone together, should be observing proprieties. But she was glad he was there, needed him there. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Too much on my mind. You? Same. He crossed to stand beside her at the window. I keep thinking about tomorrow, about what your father might do, about Elizabeth? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Yes, I loved her so much, Clara, and I'm terrified that by loving you, I'm somehow betraying her memory. Logically, I know that's not true, but the heart isn't logical. Clara took his hand, threading her fingers through his. Elizabeth would want you to be happy. From everything you and Rosa have told me about her, she'd want you to live, to love again. You're not betraying her, you're honoring her by having the courage to open your heart again. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just someone who's learned that love isn't a finite resource, that we can love many people in different ways without diminishing any of them. I love Molly. I love Rosa. I love you. None of those loves make the others less. Samuel pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, gathering strength for tomorrow. Whatever happens, Samuel whispered against her hair, whatever your father tries, whatever obstacles come our way, we face them together. Agreed? Agreed. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of Texas autumn day that felt like a gift from God. Clara woke to find Rosa already in her room, the wedding dress laid out on the bed. It was beautiful, cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, simple but elegant, perfect for a ranch wedding. Clara touched it with trembling fingers. Rosa, it's gorgeous. Try it on. Let's make sure everything fits. The dress fit perfectly, hugging Clara's waist before flowing into a modest train. Rosa pinned Clara's hair up, leaving a few curls to frame her face, and placed a small crown of wildflowers on her head. Look at you, Molly breathed from the doorway. You look like a princess. Clara looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, confident, loved. Nothing like the desperate girl who'd stabbed a knife into an altar months ago. I'm getting married, she said, the reality hitting her. Yes, you are, Rosa said, squeezing her shoulders. And you're going to be so happy, mija. I can feel it. They rode to the church in the wagon, Clara, Molly, and Rosa. Samuel had gone ahead to wait at the altar, to stand where she'd once refused him, to receive her this time as a willing bride. The church was small but packed with people who mattered, ranch hands, townspeople who'd become friends, the Thorntons, Reverend Walsh waiting with his Bible, and Samuel standing at the altar in his best suit, his eyes fixed on the door. Clara took a deep breath, preparing to walk down that aisle when she heard a commotion outside. You can't go in there, Sheriff Brady's voice. She's my daughter. I got her right. William Whitmore. Clara's heart sank. He'd come, just like they'd feared. She heard scuffling, heard her father's drunken shouting, heard people inside the church murmuring. Samuel appeared in the doorway. Clara, I know, he's here. You don't have to do this now. We can wait until... No. Clara handed her bouquet to Molly. I'm going out there. Clara, you don't have to face him. Yes, I do. One more time. Then never again. She walked out of the church, Rosa and Molly right behind her, to find her father struggling against Sheriff Brady's hold. He looked worse than ever, filthy, wild-eyed, desperate. "There she is," William shouted when he saw her. "There's my daughter, about to make the biggest mistake of her life." Clara walked down the church steps, standing tall in her wedding dress, her head held high. "I'm making a choice, not a mistake. There's a difference." "He's using you. Can't you see that? He bought you, and now he's making it legal." "He never bought me. He saved me. From you, from Silas Crane, from a life of misery. Samuel gave me the choice you never did. The choice to say no, the choice to say yes, the choice to write my own story. I'm your father. You're the man who gave me life, and then spent 17 years trying to destroy it. You're the man who hit me, who neglected Molly, who drank away every penny we had. You're the man who tried to sell me to a brothel owner to pay your gambling debts." Clara's voice rang out, strong and clear, letting everyone hear the truth. "You stopped being my father the day you chose whiskey over your children." William's face crumpled, rage mixing with something that might have been shame. "I did my best. Your best was terrible. But you know what? I forgive you." The words shocked everyone, including Clara herself. But once she said them, she knew they were true. "I forgive you," she repeated, "not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to walk into that church and marry the man I love without carrying your hatred any longer. I forgive you, and I release you, and I pray you find whatever it is you need to stop destroying yourself. But I'm done being part of your destruction." She turned to Sheriff Brady. "Please take him away. Not to jail, just away. Get him sobered up, put him on a stage to anywhere but here. I'll pay for it. Clara, you don't have to—" Samuel had come down the steps to stand beside her. "Yes, I do. One last time, I do this for him. Not because he's earned it, but because I want to be free of him completely. Give him a fresh start somewhere else, somewhere he can maybe, possibly, find a reason to stop drinking himself to death." Sheriff Brady nodded. "I'll see to it personally." As the sheriff led William away, Clara's father looked back at her. For just a moment, she saw the man he might have been, the father who'd held her when she was small, who'd loved her mother, who'd had dreams before whiskey drowned them all. "Goodbye, Pa," Clara said softly. "I hope you find peace." Then he was gone, and Clara stood in front of the church in her wedding dress, surrounded by people who loved her, with Samuel's hand in hers. "Ready now?" Samuel asked gently. Clara looked up at this man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who'd given her everything without asking for anything in return, who was about to become her husband by her choice and hers alone. "I'm ready." They walked into the church together, past the gathered guests, up to the altar where Reverend Walsh waited with a knowing smile. Molly and Rosa stood to the side as witnesses, both crying happy tears. "We are gathered here today," Reverend Walsh began, "to witness the marriage of Samuel Duran and Clara Whitmore. And this time, I have no doubt that both parties are here willingly." Gentle laughter rippled through the church. The ceremony proceeded, readings and prayers washing over Clara like a benediction. Then it was time for vows, and Samuel turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Clara," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "months ago you stood at this altar and said no to me. It was the bravest thing I'd ever seen. You refused to be owned, refused to surrender your freedom for safety. Today, you're saying yes, and it's even braver. Because saying yes means trusting, means being vulnerable, means believing that love can heal instead of harm. I promise you, I will spend every day earning that trust. I will be your partner, your friend, your protector when you need protection, and your equal always. I will love you in sunshine and storm, in joy and sorrow, until my last breath. You chose freedom once. Today, you choose love. And I choose you, forever." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she squeezed Samuel's hands, gathering her courage for her own vows. "Samuel, when I stabbed that knife into this altar, I thought I was choosing freedom, but I was really choosing fear, fear of being hurt, fear of being controlled, fear of becoming like my mother. You taught me that real freedom isn't running from fear, it's facing it, choosing love despite it, building a life on trust instead of terror. You gave me the gift of choice, the choice to say no, and then later the choice to say yes. Today I choose you, not because I need you to survive, but because I want you in my life. I want your partnership, your laughter, your quiet strength. I want to build a future with you, to face whatever comes together. I love you, Samuel Duran, and I choose this love freely, joyfully, completely. Reverend Walsh beamed at them both. By the power vested in me, and with great joy, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Samuel cupped Clara's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears, and kissed her softly, reverently, as applause and cheers erupted around them. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. Mrs. Duran, Samuel whispered. Mr. Duran, Clara replied, testing out the new name, finding it fit perfectly. They walked down the aisle together, husband and wife, to a future they'd chosen together. Outside the church, people showered them with rice and good wishes. Molly hugged Clara so tight she could barely breathe, and Rosa kissed both their cheeks, murmuring blessings in Spanish. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and food laid out in abundance. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Clara danced with Samuel, with Molly, with the ranch hands who'd become friends. She danced until her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Samuel pulled Clara away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the porch. Happy? He asked. Deliriously. You? More than I ever thought I'd be again. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Thank you for saying yes. For choosing this. For choosing us. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, looking into those storm cloud eyes that had become home. Thank you for letting me say no first. For teaching me that love can be choice, not chains. They stood there as the party continued around them, as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as their life together officially began. Clara thought about the girl she'd been, desperate, angry, fighting for survival. That girl was still part of her, would always be part of her. But she'd grown into someone new, someone who could love without losing herself, who could trust without abandoning caution, who could build a future on hope instead of fear. What are you thinking about? Samuel asked. About how far I've come, about how I almost let fear win, about how glad I am that I didn't. Me too, on all counts. As night fell over the ranch, as guests began to depart with fond farewells and knowing smiles, Clara and Samuel remained on the porch, holding each other, gathering strength for the life ahead. There would be challenges, Clara knew. There would be hard days and difficult decisions, joy and sorrow, triumph and loss. But they would face it all together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd chosen each other freely and completely. Ready to start our life together? Samuel asked as the last guest departed. Clara smiled, taking his hand and leading him toward the house that was now truly theirs. I've been ready since the moment I chose you. They crossed the threshold together, leaving the past behind and stepping into a future bright with possibility, built on the foundation of choice, trust, and love that would last a lifetime. The first morning of married life arrived with a gentleness that surprised Clara. She woke to find herself in Samuel's arms, sunlight streaming through windows that were now in their shared bedroom. The room that had been his alone, now transformed into theirs. His breathing was steady against her hair, peaceful in a way she'd never seen him during waking hours. She allowed herself a moment to simply exist in this new reality. She was Clara Duran now, wife to a good man, mistress of a ranch that felt like home, sister to Molly, who slept safely down the hall, part of a family built not by blood, but by choice. The girl who'd stabbed a knife into an altar seemed like someone from another lifetime, yet Clara could still feel her inside, that fierce, protective part that had gotten her here, that would never fully disappear. Samuel stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. A slow smile spread across his face. Morning, Mrs. Duran. Morning, Mr. Duran. The name still felt new on her tongue, like a gift she was learning to unwrap. Any regrets? Clara pretended to consider. Well, Rosa's already banging around in the kitchen, which means I should be down there helping her, and I can hear the ranch hands starting work outside, which means you should probably be out there. So yes, I regret that marriage doesn't come with the luxury of staying in bed all day. Samuel laughed, pulling her closer. Give it another week. The novelty of having a wife will wear off, and I'll be back to my grumpy, work-obsessed self. Liar. You were never grumpy with me. Distant, maybe, at first, but never grumpy. That's because you terrified me from the start. Still do, if I'm honest. Clara propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at him with amusement. I terrify you? The woman who didn't know how to mend a fence 6 months ago terrifies the man who built this ranch from nothing? You terrify me because you made me feel things I thought I'd buried with Elizabeth. You made me want to live again instead of just existing. That kind of power is terrifying. The mention of Elizabeth could have been awkward, but Clara had made peace with the ghost of Samuel's first wife. Elizabeth wasn't a rival, but a predecessor, someone who'd loved Samuel well and taught him how to be a good husband. Clara was grateful to her in a strange way. She'd like you, you know, Samuel said, as if reading her thoughts. Elizabeth, she'd like your fire, your refusal to be anything less than yourself. I hope so. I hope she'd be glad you found happiness again. She would be. She hated the thought of me being alone. Made me promise, at the end, that I wouldn't bury myself with her. Took me 3 years to honor that promise, but here we are. Clara kissed him softly. Here we are. Eventually, duty called them from bed. Clara dressed in a simple work dress, no longer her mother's faded blue cotton, but something Rosa had made for her, sturdy and pretty in equal measure. She braided her hair, pinned it up, and made her way downstairs to find Molly already at the kitchen table, grinning like the cat that got the cream. Well, well, look who finally decided to join the living. Clara felt her cheeks heat. Don't start. I'm just saying, it's nearly 7. You're usually up by 5. I was beginning to think you'd sleep through breakfast entirely. Rosa swatted Molly with a kitchen towel. Leave your sister alone. She's a new bride. She's entitled to a late morning. It's not even that late, Clara protested. But she was smiling. The teasing felt normal, comfortable, like the family dynamics they'd all settled into. Samuel appeared in the doorway, looking unfairly handsome even in his work clothes. Molly, if you're done tormenting your sister, Thunder needs exercise. You up for a ride before school? Molly jumped up eagerly. Really? I can ride Thunder? As long as you promise not to race him. He's fast, and I don't want to have to explain to your sister why I let you break your neck on your first week of being my official sister-in-law. The word hung in the air, sister-in-law. The legal tie that now bound them all as family. Molly's eyes grew bright with emotion. I'd like that, she said quietly. Having you as my brother. For real. Samuel crossed the kitchen and pulled Molly into a hug, something he'd grown comfortable with over the months. You've been my sister in all the ways that matter for a while now. This just makes it official. Clara watched them, her heart full to bursting. This was what family was supposed to be, people who chose each other, who showed up for each other, who loved without conditions or contracts. The weeks following the wedding settled into a new rhythm. Clara moved fully into her role as both ranch manager and Samuel's wife, the two identities blending seamlessly. She rode out with him to check on cattle, helped strategize about water rights and grazing rotation, kept the books with an accuracy that impressed even Samuel. In the evenings, they'd sit together in the study, no longer his study, but theirs, and talk about everything and nothing. But it was the small intimacies of marriage that surprised Clara most. The way Samuel would touch the small of her back as he passed her in the kitchen, the way he'd pull her into his lap while they reviewed ledgers, claiming he thought better with her close by, the way he'd kiss her goodnight and good morning and a dozen times in between, like he was making up for all the kisses he hadn't been allowed to give her before. I think I'm getting the hang of this marriage thing, Clara said one night, curled against him in their bed. Only think. I'm wounded. Well, I've only been married 3 weeks. Give me time to form a definitive opinion. Samuel's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Take all the time you need. I've got forever to convince you it was the right choice. But the peaceful weeks couldn't last forever. A month after the wedding, trouble arrived in the form of a stranger riding up to the ranch house on a rain-soaked afternoon. Clara was in the kitchen with Rosa, preparing supper, when she heard the hoofbeats. We expecting anyone? Rosa asked, moving to the window. Clara looked out to see a man in a fine suit dismounting from an equally fine horse, neither of which belonged anywhere near a working ranch in the middle of nowhere. No, Samuel's out in the west pasture. Should I get him? Let's see what the stranger wants first. Clara dried her hands on her apron and stepped out onto the porch. The man looked up at her, his expression calculating in a way that made her skin crawl. He was handsome in a cold sort of way, with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Duran, I presume?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "That's right. Can I help you?" "I certainly hope so. My name is Marcus Fletcher. I believe you know my mother?" Fletcher. Mrs. Fletcher, the woman who'd made snide remarks about Clara's reputation at church. This must be her son, and if the son was anything like the mother, this conversation wasn't going to be pleasant. "I know of your mother," Clara said carefully. "What brings you out here, Mr. Fletcher?" "Business, I'm afraid. May I come in? It's rather wet out here." Every instinct told Clara to say no, but ranch hospitality demanded otherwise. "Of course. Rosa, could you bring coffee to the parlor?" She led Marcus Fletcher inside, noting how his eyes took in every detail of the house, assessing, calculating, pricing. They settled in the parlor, and Clara waited for him to state his business. "I'll get straight to the point, Mrs. Duran. My father owns the land bordering yours to the north. I'm here on his behalf to discuss water rights." Clara's stomach sank. The creek that ran through the north pasture was vital to their operation, and it originated on Fletcher land before flowing onto theirs. Samuel had mentioned the Fletchers had been reasonable about water access for years, but reasonable could change quickly when money was involved. "What about the water rights?" Clara asked, keeping her voice neutral. "My father is getting older, thinking about his legacy. He's considering several options for the land, including leasing it to a mining company that's interested in the area. But such an arrangement would require significant water usage. We'd need to divert the creek before it reaches your property. That creek is the primary water source for our north pasture. Our cattle depend on it. You divert it, you destroy our grazing land." Marcus smiled that cold smile again. "I understand your concern. That's why I'm here with a proposition. My father is willing to guarantee continued water access, for a price." "How much?" $500 annually, and a percentage of your cattle profits, say 15%? Clara's hands clenched in her lap. $500 was manageable, barely, but 15% of their profits would cripple them. The Fletchers knew it too. This wasn't a fair negotiation, it was extortion. "That's robbery," Clara said flatly. "That's business. Water is a valuable commodity in Texas, Mrs. Duran. I'm sure your husband will understand that." "My husband isn't here, but I can speak for us both. We won't agree to those terms." Marcus leaned back in his chair, unconcerned. "Then perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements. I've heard your sister is quite the accomplished student. Miss Thornton speaks highly of her. I'm sure we could work something out that benefits everyone. Perhaps Molly could come work for my family? We'd pay handsomely for a well-educated young woman to serve as a companion to my younger sisters." The implication was clear, and it made Clara's blood run cold. He was suggesting Molly as payment, dressed up in pretty words about employment. Clara stood, her voice like ice. "Get out!" "Mrs. Duran, I don't think you understand the position you're in." "I understand perfectly. You're trying to extort money from us by threatening our water supply. And when I refused, you suggested my 14-year-old sister as an alternative payment. I'm giving you one chance to leave this property before I get my rifle and escort you out myself." Marcus stood slowly, his pleasant facade cracking to reveal the cruelty beneath. "You're making a mistake. My father has lawyers, connections. We can make your lives very difficult. And my husband has a reputation for dealing with bullies who threaten his family. I suggest you take your proposition to him directly if you're so confident in it. See how that works out for you." Marcus's smile turned vicious. "Everyone warned my father that Samuel Duran had made a poor choice, marrying William Whitmore's daughter, a drunk's offspring with a sharp tongue and no breeding. I see they were right. The words should have hurt, but Clara had been called worse by better people. At least I wasn't raised to prey on decent folk and threaten children. Now get out of my house." Marcus left, but not before delivering one final warning. "You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, my father begins the legal process to divert the creek. Think carefully, Mrs. Duran. $500 and 15% is much cheaper than losing your water entirely." The moment he was gone, Clara's composure cracked. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, her face troubled.
You heard? Every word. That man is evil, mija. Pure evil. I need to find Samuel. He needs to know about this.
Clara saddled Thunder with shaking hands and rode out to the west pasture, her mind racing. The Fletchers were powerful. Old money, old land, old connections. They could probably do exactly what they threatened. But the terms were impossible, and the suggestion about Molly had revealed their true nature. These weren't honorable people looking for fair compensation. These were predators looking for prey. She found Samuel mending fence with 2 ranch hands. He looked up at her approach, his expression shifting from pleasure to concern when he saw her face. "Clara, what's wrong?" She explained everything: Marcus Fletcher's visit, the water rights threat, the extortion disguised as business, the veiled proposition about Molly. Samuel's expression grew darker with each word, his hands clenching the fence post until his knuckles went white. He suggested Molly as payment? Samuel's voice was deadly quiet. Not in those exact words, but yes. Employment with his family, he said. But we both know what he meant. Samuel turned to the ranch hands. Tom, ride to town and fetch Judge Thornton. Tell her it's urgent. Billy, go back to the house and make sure Molly doesn't leave the property. No one gets near her. Understand? Both men nodded and rode off at a gallop. Samuel helped Clara down from Thunder, holding her steady when she swayed slightly. I'm all right, she said, just angry and scared. Samuel, if they cut off our water, they won't. I won't let them. His jaw was set in a way Clara had learned meant he was planning, strategizing. The Fletchers have been trying to expand their holdings for years. This is just another move in that game. But they made a mistake. What mistake? They threatened my family, our family, and I don't take that lightly. They rode back to the house together, Samuel's presence a comfort, even as Clara's mind spun with worry. Judge Thornton arrived within the hour, her expression grim as Samuel explained the situation. The Fletchers have been trying this for years, she said, settling in the parlor with coffee Clara barely remembered making. Buying up water rights, controlling access, squeezing out smaller ranchers. Most people pay because they can't afford to fight. But you're not most people, Samuel. What are our options? Legal options? Limited. Old Fletcher has good lawyers, and water law in Texas is complicated. They could tie you up in court for years while your cattle die of thirst. Judge Thornton set down her cup with a decisive click. But there might be another way. Fletcher wants to lease to a mining company, correct? That's what his son said. Mining requires permits, environmental assessments, approval from the county. I sit on that board, and I know for a fact that the creek in question feeds into the main water supply for Redemption. If Fletcher diverts it for mining, he's not just affecting your ranch, he's affecting the entire town. Samuel leaned forward. Can you block the permits? If I have cause. And contaminating the town's water supply is cause. But I'll need proof of Fletcher's intentions, documentation of the mining company's plans. Marcus Fletcher is coming back in a week for our answer. What if we string him along, get him to provide details about the mining operation? Judge Thornton smiled. Now you're thinking like a lawyer. Get him talking, get him to put it in writing if possible. Once we have proof that his plans endanger the town's water, I can shut down the whole operation. After Judge Thornton left, Clara found Samuel on the porch, staring out at the prairie with troubled eyes. We'll beat them, she said, slipping her hand into his. We faced worse, have we? Your father was a drunk bully, but the Fletchers are something else. They have money, power, respectability. They can destroy us legally and sleep soundly at night. So we don't fight them legally. We fight them smart. We get the town on our side. We expose their plans. We make it impossible for them to proceed without looking like villains. Samuel turned to her, something like wonder in his eyes. You're ruthless when you need to be, aren't you? I learned from the best. My father taught me how to survive against impossible odds. You taught me how to fight for what I love. The Fletchers don't stand a chance. Over the next days, they prepared. Samuel reached out to other ranchers who'd been pressured by the Fletchers, building a coalition of people who'd been victims of their schemes. Clara worked with Judge Thornton to research water law and environmental regulations. Molly, kept safe at the ranch, helped Rosa prepare for what Clara was starting to think of as a war council. Marcus Fletcher returned exactly 1 week later, his confidence apparently unshaken. Clara met him on the porch with Samuel, Judge Thornton, and 3 other ranchers present. Mrs. Duran, Mr. Duran, I trust you've reconsidered my father's generous offer. We have some questions first, Samuel said, about the mining operation. What company? What are they mining? What's the environmental impact? Marcus looked slightly uncomfortable with the audience, but pressed on. The company is Bartlett Mining, out of Colorado. They're interested in silver deposits on Fletcher land. As for environmental impact, that's not really our concern. It should be, Judge Thornton cut in, because that creek feeds into Redemption's water supply. Any contamination from mining affects the entire town. I assume Bartlett Mining has filed the appropriate environmental assessments. Marcus's face paled slightly. I'm sure they've filed whatever's necessary. They haven't, Judge Thornton said crisply. I checked. Which means any agreement with them is premature and any diversion of water is illegal until proper permits are obtained. Permits that I, as a member of the county board, will be voting on. You can't block legitimate business. I can block business that endangers public health and water supplies. And I will. Judge Thornton stood, her small frame radiating authority. You tell your father that his water rights end where public safety begins. He wants to divert that creek. He needs permits. And to get permits, he needs environmental assessments. And those assessments will show that mining operations will contaminate our water supply, which means no permits, which means no mining, which means Mr. Duran's water rights remain intact. Marcus Fletcher looked between them, clearly realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. My father won't accept this. Your father will accept it, or face a lawsuit from every rancher and townsperson affected by his schemes, one of the other ranchers spoke up. We're done being pushed around, Fletcher. Take that message back. After Marcus left, this time with his tail between his legs, the group erupted in relieved conversation. But Clara noticed Samuel slipping away toward the barn. She followed, finding him leaning against a stall, his shoulders tense. We won, she said softly. Why do you look like we lost? Samuel turned to her, his expression troubled. Because this isn't over. The Fletchers will find another way, another angle. They always do. And next time, they might not be so obvious about their intentions. Next time, we might not see it coming. Clara moved to stand in front of him, taking his face in her hands. Then we'll deal with next time when it comes. Samuel, we can't live in fear of what might happen. We can only face what does happen, together. Isn't that what you told me? That we're stronger together than apart. I'm supposed to protect you, protect this family. And I almost failed. You didn't fail. We didn't fail. We faced a threat and we beat it. Not with money or violence, but with intelligence and community. That's the kind of victory worth celebrating. Samuel pulled her close, his arms tight around her. How did I get lucky enough to find you? You didn't find me. I found you. Well, technically my father sold me to you. I said no. You let me say no? Then I chose you. It's complicated. He laughed against her hair, the sound releasing the tension that had gripped him. It is complicated, but I wouldn't change a single complication. That night, the ranch felt like a fortress. Walls built not of stone but of community, of people who'd stood together against a common threat. Rosa cooked a feast, Molly played music on the old piano in the parlor, and the house filled with laughter and relief. Clara stood in the doorway between the kitchen and parlor, watching her family, because that's what they were, what they'd become. Samuel caught her eye from across the room and smiled, that slow smile that was hers alone. Molly was teaching one of the ranch hands a dance step, her laughter bright and carefree. Rosa hummed while she worked, her face peaceful. This was what she'd fought for, what she'd chosen. Not just safety or survival, but joy. Not just a house, but a home. Not just existence, but a life worth living. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Molly approached Clara with a letter in her hand. This came for me today. From Miss Thornton. Clara took the letter, scanning it quickly. It was a recommendation for a women's college in Austin, along with information about scholarships and programs for promising students. College, Clara breathed. Molly, this is terrifying, exciting, impossible. I don't know what it is. Molly's eyes were bright with unshed tears. It's so far away. And the cost, even with scholarships. We'll manage the cost, Samuel said, appearing beside them. If you want to go, we'll make it happen. But that's years away. I'm only 14. I shouldn't even be thinking about this yet. Clara pulled her sister close. You should be thinking about it. You should be dreaming about it. Because, Molly, you deserve every opportunity, every chance to become whoever you want to be. And if that means college in Austin or anywhere else, we'll support you. Even if it means leaving you? Especially if it means that, because you leaving means you're moving forward, building your own life. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Molly cried then, happy tears and scared tears all mixed together, and Clara held her while Samuel's hand rested on her shoulder, solid and reassuring. The months that followed brought their own challenges and triumphs. The Fletchers, true to prediction, tried other schemes to expand their holdings, but each time the community stood firm. Clara and Samuel built their partnership, learning each other's rhythms, fighting and making up, growing together in ways that surprised them both. Clara discovered she was pregnant on a cold January morning, 6 months after the wedding. She'd suspected for weeks but had been afraid to hope, afraid to trust in yet another good thing. Rosa confirmed it with one look, pulling Clara into a fierce hug. A baby. Oh, mija, a baby in this house again. Clara's hand moved to her still flat stomach, wonder and terror warring inside her. I'm scared, Rosa. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm like, you're not like Elizabeth. Every pregnancy is different. Every woman is different. And Clara, you're strong, stronger than you know. Telling Samuel was both easier and harder than she'd expected. She found him in the study after supper, working on the eternal ledgers. I need to tell you something. He looked up, immediately alert to the seriousness in her tone. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think anything's wrong. The word stuck in her throat, weighted with all it meant. Understanding dawned on Samuel's face. You're pregnant. Yes, Rosa confirmed it today. I'm about 8 weeks along, she thinks. Samuel stood slowly, crossing to her with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. When he reached her, his hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with infinite gentleness. How do you feel about it? He asked. Terrified, happy, scared, excited, all of it at once. Me too. His voice was rough with emotion. I'm so scared, Clara. Elizabeth. I know, but I'm not Elizabeth, and this baby isn't that baby. We can't let fear steal our joy. Samuel pulled her close, one hand moving to rest on her stomach. A baby, our baby. God, Clara, after everything, I never thought I'd have this again. Are you happy? Truly? I'm terrified and happy and grateful and so in love with you. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. We're having a baby. They told Molly that night, who immediately began planning how to be the best aunt in Texas. They told Rosa, who cried happy tears and immediately began planning nursery arrangements. Word spread through the ranch and then the town, and Clara found herself overwhelmed with advice, warnings, old wives' tales, and genuine care from the community that had become hers. The pregnancy progressed without incident through the winter and into spring. Clara's body changed, her stomach swelling with new life, and Samuel was endlessly fascinated by every development. He'd rest his hand on her stomach to feel the baby kick, talk to her belly about ranch business and horses and all the things he wanted to teach their child. What if it's a girl? Clara asked one night, lying in bed with Samuel's hand on her stomach. Then she'll be brilliant and fierce, just like her mother. And if it's a boy? Then he'll be kind and strong, with his mother's courage and his father's stubbornness. That's a terrifying combination. Samuel laughed. We'll manage. We've managed everything else. But the fear lingered for Samuel. Clara could see it. As her pregnancy advanced, as she grew larger and the birth grew closer, she'd catch him watching her with an expression of such deep worry that her heart ached. Talk to me, she said one evening in her 8th month, finding him on the porch as usual, staring at the prairie. I can't lose you, Clara. If something goes wrong, if I have to choose, you won't have to choose. And Samuel, if something does go wrong, you choose me. Always me. Do you understand? I can't promise that. Yes, you can. You have to. Because I'm not going into that birthing room afraid that you'll sacrifice me for a baby we haven't even met yet. I need to know you'll choose me, that you value my life as much as this child's. Samuel's face crumpled. Of course I value your life. Clara, you are my life, but nothing. Promise me. Promise that if it comes to it, you choose me. I promise. God help me. I promise. Labor began on a bright morning in late April, with the prairie blooming and the sky impossibly blue. Clara's water broke while she was working in the kitchen garden, and Rosa immediately took charge, ushering her inside and sending Tom for the doctor. Samuel was in the north pasture, and Clara prayed he'd make it back in time. The contractions started slowly, then built in intensity and frequency until Clara was gripping the bedpost, breathing through pain unlike anything she'd experienced. "You're doing fine, mija," Rosa encouraged, her capable hands supporting Clara. "Just breathe. The doctor will be here soon." But the doctor was delayed, another birth on the other side of town, and the baby wasn't waiting. Samuel burst through the door just as Clara's body began to push, his face pale with fear and determination. I'm here, love." "The baby's coming," Rosa said. "Now, we can't wait for the doctor." Clara saw the fear flash across Samuel's face, the memory of Elizabeth's death no doubt haunting him. But he pushed it aside, moving to Clara's side, taking her hand. "You can do this. You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." The birth was hard but mercifully quick. With Rosa's guidance and Samuel's support, Clara brought their daughter into the world as the sun reached its zenith. The baby's cry filled the room, healthy, strong, perfect. "A girl," Rosa announced, tears streaming down her face. "A beautiful girl." Samuel cut the cord with shaking hands, and Rosa placed the baby on Clara's chest. Clara looked down at her daughter, red-faced, wrinkled, absolutely perfect, and felt something shift fundamentally in her heart. This was her child, hers and Samuel's, born of love and choice and hope. "She's perfect," Clara whispered. "Samuel, look at her." Samuel was crying openly, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "She looks like you. She has your nose." "Poor thing, I was hoping she'd get your nose." They laughed through their tears, and the baby squirmed against Clara's chest, already demanding attention. The doctor arrived 30 minutes later to find everything already done. Mother and baby healthy and resting. He checked them both over, pronounced them well, and left with a chuckle about babies who couldn't wait for proper medical attendance. Molly was allowed in to meet her niece, and her face when she saw the baby was pure joy. "She's so tiny and pink. Can I hold her?" Clara carefully transferred the baby to Molly's arms, showing her how to support the head. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months without settling on anything, but now, looking at their daughter's face, Clara knew. "Grace," she said. "Grace Elizabeth Duran." Samuel's breath caught. "Elizabeth?" She'd want to be remembered, and Grace deserves to know about the woman who loved you first, who made you into the man who could love me. Grace Elizabeth, for new beginnings and honored memories. Samuel kissed Clara's forehead, his tears falling on her hair. Grace Elizabeth. It's perfect. The weeks after Grace's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Clara had never known love like this, fierce, protective, overwhelming. She understood now why parents did impossible things for their children, understood the depth of Rosa's devotion, understood her own mother's desperate love that had endured even her father's cruelty. Samuel was a revelation as a father. He'd wake with Grace in the night, walking her around the room and singing soft Spanish lullabies Rosa had taught him. He'd change her nappies without complaint, talk to her about ranch business like she understood every word, look at her like she was the greatest miracle he'd ever witnessed. "You're besotted," Clara observed one night, watching him hold Grace. "Completely. Hopelessly. She has me wrapped around her tiny finger already. She's going to be spoiled beyond measure. That's what aunts and fathers are for. You're the one who has to teach her discipline and character." Lucky me. But Clara wouldn't have traded it for anything, the exhaustion, the mess, the complete upending of their quiet life. Grace was worth every sleepless night, every worry, every moment of doubt. Summer arrived, and with it, a letter that changed everything. Molly had been accepted to the Women's College in Austin with a full scholarship, starting in the fall. She'd be leaving, going off to build her own life. And Clara felt the bittersweet pride of watching someone you love outgrow their need for you. "I don't have to go," Molly said, though her eyes betrayed how much she wanted to. "I could stay here, Help with Grace? Work the ranch? You're going, Clara said firmly. You're going to college. You're going to learn everything they can teach you, and you're going to build whatever life you want. That's not negotiable. But you'll miss me. Of course I'll miss you. I'll miss you every single day. But Molly, I didn't fight to give you freedom just so you could stay here out of obligation. You go. You live. You become whoever you're meant to be. That's all I've ever wanted. When Molly left for Austin in September, the house felt emptier despite Grace's presence. Clara cried as the stage pulled away, taking her sister toward a future bright with possibility.
Samuel held her as she wept, understanding the peculiar grief of losing someone to their own success. She'll be back for Christmas, he reminded her. I know she needs this. It just hurts. Love always does, but it's worth it. Clara looked up at this man who'd taught her that love could heal instead of harm, who'd given her the freedom to choose and then the courage to choose him. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a girl being sold at an altar to a woman holding her own child, from desperation to hope, from survival to truly living. Yes, she agreed, it's worth it, all of it. They stood together on the porch as the sun set over the prairie, Grace sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms, the ranch stretching out before them like a promise kept. Clara had been forced to marry a man older than her father, had said no with a knife and courage, had chosen love on her own terms. What happened next, no one had expected. Not the town gossips, not her father, not even Clara herself. She'd found not just safety, but joy. Not just a house, but a home. Not just survival, but a life worth living, built on choice and trust and love that multiplied instead of divided. The girl who'd stabbed a knife into an altar had become a woman who built a future with her own hands, who chose her own story, who loved without losing herself. And that, Clara thought, rocking her daughter as stars began to appear in the vast Texas sky, was the greatest victory of all. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, his arm around her waist. "About how far I've come. About how I almost let fear win. About how grateful I am that I didn't." Samuel kissed her temple. "Me too, on all counts." As night fell over the Duran Ranch, as Grace stirred and demanded feeding, as Rosa called them in for supper, Clara felt the weight of contentment settle deep in her bones. The journey had been hard, the battles many, the pain real. But standing here with her family, chosen, built, fiercely protected, Clara knew that every struggle had been worth it. She'd been forced to marry a man older than her father. What happened next, no one expected, not even Clara herself. She'd found love, built a family, created a life beyond her wildest dreams, and she'd done it all by making the bravest choice of all, choosing to hope, choosing to trust, choosing to believe that she deserved happiness. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And Clara, no longer the desperate girl from Dead Horse, but a woman who'd claimed her own destiny, stepped into that tomorrow with her head held high and her heart full of love. This was her story. Not the one her father had written, not the one circumstance had tried to force on her, but the one she'd chosen to write herself. And it was beautiful.